Chapter 730. The scroll slowly unfolded and a mysterious force rippled out. A ray of light shot up into the sky. With a point of Chui San'er's finger, the light fell on Tang Zheng's body. Huh! Tang Zheng's body tensed up and he turned pale with fright. A strong suction force was firmly attracting him. What's going on? He hurriedly looked at the scroll above his head. It had been completely unfolded. The vast mountains and rivers in the scroll were vivid and lifelike, as if they were real. A whirlpool appeared in the center of the scroll, firmly attracting Tang Zheng, trying to suck him in. I must not be sucked in. Although Tang Zheng did not understand what the scroll was, he knew that being sucked in was not a good thing. He hurriedly circulated his qi, circulating it through his 8 extraordinary meridians to resist the suction force. Huh! Chui San was shocked to see that his tried and tested killing move did not have an immediate effect. A ruthless look flashed across his face as he said, "Your third master wants to see how you can resist my mountain river map of the gods of earth and Vale." As soon as his voice fell, the suction force suddenly increased. Tang Zheng knew that something was wrong. He roared and pushed his palms above his head. Whoosh! A strong suction force also formed in his palms. Sky-swallowing technique. 8 Since the mountain river map was a gravitational force, then he would use gravity against gravity. As expected, once the sky-swallowing technique was used, the pressure suddenly decreased. War Spirit followed closely behind. With a slash of the sword, the turbulent airflow scattered in all directions. Chui San could not stand steadily and sat on the ground. Without Chui San'er's support, the mountain river map floated down. Tang Zheng jumped and caught it. "Don't touch my treasure, quickly return it to me." Seeing this, Chui San hysterically shouted and wanted to circulate his qi. However, how could Tang Zheng give him the chance? A cold light flashed in his hand and War Spirit flew out, piercing through Chui San'er's chest. Oh my god! Wu Laoer, who had been sitting on the mountain and watching the tigers fight, was so scared that he ran away. This scene was completely beyond his understanding, and his heart was instantly filled with fear. Tang Zheng glanced at Wu Laoer, who had already rushed into the darkness ahead. He didn't immediately chase after him. Instead, he carefully observed the scroll in his hand. The scroll was about half a meter long, and various mountains and rivers were drawn on it. Moreover, most of them were not mountains and rivers in Hua Xia's reality, which made Tang Zheng quite surprised. There was a mysterious fluctuation of spiritual energy on the painting. Could it be that the treasure Chui San obtained from the Grand Myriad Mountains was this stately painting? Did he find this ancient tomb just by relying on this map? Professor Qi also came over and stared straight at the painting. His eyes lit up as he looked at the bright stars in the sky. I've never seen such a magical painting. Look at the river, the water is actually flowing. And that forest, the branches and leaves are swaying as if they're being blown by the wind. Professor Qi was already dumbfounded as he cried out in surprise. Tang Zheng fixed his eyes on it. Sure enough, he didn't notice this clue just now. Every blade of grass and every tree in the stately painting seemed to have vitality. This kind of thing had never been seen or heard of before. This is a miracle. Professor Qi smacked his lips, and his jaw almost fell to the ground. Professor Qi couldn't help but rub the painting, but there was nothing. The attraction just now had already disappeared without a trace. Tang Zheng, can you see the secret inside? Tang Zheng shook his head. He was experienced and knowledgeable, but he had never seen such a magical painting. Professor Qi, let's go back and study it carefully. Let's catch up first. There must be more things over there, Tang Zheng reminded. Professor Qi's eyes lit up, and he nodded in agreement. Yes, that Wu Laoer has already escaped. We must catch up to prevent him from destroying more cultural relics. Tang Zheng casually threw the stately painting into the summer bag. Huh! Suddenly, he exclaimed. The stately painting didn't react at all. What's the matter? Why can't it be put into the summer bag? Tang Zheng had never encountered such a situation before. Even a colossal figure like the venerable ideologist could be put into the Sumra bag, but this small painting couldn't be put in. This was too strange. After hearing Tang Zheng's explanation, Professor Qi was also dumbfounded. He shook his head and said, "This is a matter for you cultivators. I really don't know the reason." Since it couldn't be put in the bag, Tang Zheng simply took out a backpack and carried it close to his body. Then, he set off with Professor Qi. The stars above their heads shone, but the light was very dim. The two of them were prepared and took out their flashlights. Under their feet was a flat road paved with green bricks. It was like a huge square. As far as the flashlight's light could reach, it was still an empty square. It was barren, and there was nothing in it. It couldn't illuminate the sides at all. "How big is this place?" Professor Qi couldn't help but exclaim. Tang Zheng said solemnly, "There are too many strange things in this ancient tomb." Professor Qi was incomparably excited. Strange things mean that it's magical. That's why there are so many new discoveries. After walking for a long time, they still didn't see Wu Lao's figure. Just as the two of them were about to lose hope, a huge phantom vaguely appeared in the distance. This phantom was tall and large, and its outline was very frightening. However, it was too far away to see clearly. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. They finally found the building. With a target, the two of them were energized and quickly ran toward the target. Finally, everything in front of them became clear. The colossal figure also revealed its true appearance. The two of them were startled and subconsciously stopped in their tracks. The two of them looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with shock. This was actually a huge altar. How big was it? It was as big as 10 main courts. Painting. The two of them immediately remembered the painting that the grave robber sold to Old Wei. There was such an altar in it. Moreover, it looked like it was the same one. Could that painting be describing the scene in front of them? The two of them quickly remembered another scene in the painting. A group of people were building a magnificent palace. In front of the altar, there was a dense crowd wearing bronze masks. The two of them immediately raised their flashlights and shone it over. The altar was too big. They couldn't see clearly what was behind the altar. They couldn't see if there was a crowd of bronze masks behind the altar. That painting must be a documentary of the construction of this ancient tomb. It was just stolen by the grave robbers. Professor Qi concluded. Tang Zheng nodded. His thoughts were similar to Professor Qi's. Doesn't that mean there's a palace behind it? Tang Zheng pointed at the back of the altar and said. Professor Qi muttered, "It's possible." Tang Zheng sucked in a breath of cold air. The painting clearly depicted the appearance of the palace, which towered into the clouds as if it was on par with the heavens. How magnificent it must be. Tang Zheng, take me to the altar. Professor Qi's eyes lit up with excitement. He looked up and stared at the altar. Go up? Yes, this is the place where the ancients worshipped. There are many secrets that can be found in this kind of place. We can't miss it. We have to see it first. Moreover, there were so many traps at the entrance of this ancient tomb. However, it was safe and there was no danger. This is very unusual. Therefore, we can't take the risk. We have to figure out the situation first. Professor Qi said seriously. Seeing that he was so cautious, Tang Zheng thought for a while and agreed. Then hold on tight. Tang Zheng lifted Professor Qi's shoulder, and with a tap of his toes, he flew up to the top of the altar. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Professor Qi heard the sound of the wind. He looked up subconsciously and found that they were getting higher and higher. His heart beat faster. He took a deep breath and drove away his fear. He looked up excitedly. The top of the altar was close at hand. Bang! Tang Zheng's feet landed on the ground. The dull sound of his footsteps was very obvious in the empty space. It gave the two people a fright. Tang Zheng put down Professor Qi and took a deep breath. He looked up and realized more clearly that the altar was extraordinary. What shocked him even more was that the altar seemed to be a hole. It was made of a huge stone. With Tang Zhang's knowledge, he had never heard of such a huge and complete stone in the world. Hiss. He took a deep breath and circulated his genuine qi to guard against the unexpected. Professor Qi was already squatting on the ground and studying it. There were many complicated patterns on the ground. They were not very beautiful. They were very thick and curved, giving people a strange feeling. Tang Zhang had seen the square of the witch tribe in the 100,000 mountains. That square contained divine power. Not only did it have the 4 symbols venerables, but it also had the heaven and earth mystic stone. This altar was probably as magical as the mystic stone. He did not dare to be careless. Professor Qi lowered his eyebrows and did not say anything. His thick eyebrows were deeply furrowed. He followed the patterns on the altar and ran forward. After a while, he stopped and continued to run. Tang Zhang looked at him suspiciously and did not leave his side. He did not know what he had discovered. Suddenly, Tang Zhang stopped and grabbed Professor Qi, who wanted to rush forward again. Professor Qi was caught and shouted in dissatisfaction, "Tang Zhang, what are you doing? Let go of me." Tang Zhang pulled Professor Qi behind him and cautiously said, "Professor Qi, don't be impatient." Hearing this, Professor Qi finally calmed down and asked, "What's wrong?" "There's someone," Tang Zhang said. "Someone?" Professor Qi was shocked. How could there be other people in this place? Could it be Old Wu? Over Tang Zhang's shoulder, Professor Qi finally saw that person. It was definitely not Old Wu. Although it was only a back view, it gave people a completely different feeling. This. Who is it? Professor Qi swallowed his saliva and asked. Tang Zhang shook his head and said, "Let's go up and take a look." Since he had met someone, he couldn't just turn a blind eye. The two of them walked towards the opposite side. That person kept looking into the distance like a piece of wood, not reacting at all. But when the two of them were still more than 10 steps away, that person moved. He suddenly turned around and his eyes were as sharp as a peerless treasure sword, almost blinding people. He was very particular about his clothes and his outfit was exquisite. His clothes were tailored very well, and even his nails were cut very neatly, just like a woman. But he was a man, a very exquisite man. If a man used the word exquisite, then he must be extraordinary. Chapter 731. Tang Zhang stared at this person, and the other party looked at him with interest. Obviously, this person was not an ancient person, but a modern person. His modern outfit was even more fashionable than Tang Zhang's. "Who are you?" Tang Zhang asked cautiously. This person was definitely not an ordinary grave robber. Those grave robbers were not even worthy of carrying his shoes. Even Tang Zhang did not dare to underestimate the aura that was faintly emitted. "Tang Zhang." The other party did not answer, but instead called out Tang Zhang's name. Tang Zhang and Professor Qi were both shocked. Tang Zhang was sure that he had never seen this person before. The other party left a deep impression on him. Even if he had only seen him once, he would never forget. "You know me?" The other party laughed, and his smile was even a bit evil. "Of course I know you. Your great name is like thunder to my ears. We have never met." "Yes, but I have seen your picture," the other party said bluntly. "I really did not expect to see you here. Allow me to introduce myself first, otherwise it would be rude." The other party was polite, like a noble gentleman. "This humble one is Jade-Faced Flying Dragon." His voice was raised a few notches, and his head was raised high as he said proudly. "Jade-Faced Flying Dragon?" Tang Zhang frowned. He had never heard of this person in the Jianghu. Where did this expert come from? "I think you have never heard of me, but you will remember my name in the future," Jade-Faced Flying Dragon said confidently. "Why?" "Because, I want to kill you." Jade-Faced Flying Dragon deliberately dragged out the word kill, and a murderous aura seemed to burst out from this word. Tang Zhang's body tensed up. The other party had said that he wanted to kill him. There were only two possibilities. First, he was an idiot, and only then would he be so arrogant. Second, he was a true expert, and had this confidence. Obviously, the other party did not belong to the first category. Then, he was definitely an expert, and an extraordinary one at that. He was an expert that Tang Zheng could not see through. The other party was only in his 30s, yet he had this kind of cultivation. He was definitely an outstanding person. Why was there no news of such a fierce person in the Jianghu? Seeing that Tang Zheng didn't move, fair-faced flying dragon smiled. Very good. You can still stand here after hearing that I want to kill you. In the past, when others heard this, they would immediately run away. Is that useful? Tang Zheng asked. Fair-faced flying dragon praised, you are very smart. You know that running away is futile. It only adds to the fun of the game. It doesn't have much of an effect because they all died in the end. Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched as he sneered, is that so? I'm not like those people. Are you so confident that you can kill me? Of course. Fair-faced flying dragon said without hesitation. I never thought that I would meet you here. This can be considered fate. Before I kill you, I'll let you take a look at the Heavenly Palace. Heavenly Palace? Tang Zheng and Professor Qi cried out in surprise. Oh, it seems that you don't understand the purpose of this trip, nor do you understand the truth of this ancient tomb. Fair-faced flying dragon raised an eyebrow and said with a smile that was not a smile. Could it be that you understand? I know a thing or two. Fair-faced flying dragon elegantly turned around and pointed into the distance, completely unafraid of Tang Zheng's sneak attack. Of course, Tang Zheng would not sneak attack. He and Professor Qi strode forward and looked up. Immediately, the two's attention was firmly attracted. In the distance, there was a huge palace that towered into the sky. Wasn't this the palace in the painting? Didn't so many people work so hard to build this palace? The altar and the palace were exactly the same as in the painting. The two's breaths involuntarily quickened. Fair-faced flying dragon glanced at the two and said with a smile, the wisdom of the ancients is truly endless. It's unimaginable and unattainable for us descendants. This is the heavenly palace you were talking about? Professor Qi asked with a trembling voice. He was not afraid, but excited. There had never been a record or description of this building in the history of Huaxia. This meant that this discovery was unprecedented. What did this mean for him? Money? Fame? No. He did not care about any of these. He could complete the history of Huaxia and even fill in the gaps in Huaxia's history. This was what tickled his nerves the most. Fair-faced flying dragon nodded, yes, this is the heavenly palace. It's magnificent and beautiful. Back then, Emperor Qin was truly an emperor, a peerless hero. Not only did he build the terracotta army, he also built a heavenly palace that ordinary people do not even know about. You're saying that Emperor Qin built this? Professor Qi's breaths quickened as if he was about to have a heart attack. Of course. Don't tell me that you don't know who the owner of the tomb is after entering it? Fair-faced flying dragon asked curiously. Tang Zheng and Professor Qi's cheeks turned red. They really did not know. That's true. This ancient tomb didn't even exist in historical records. How could a normal person know about it? Who knows what kind of luck those tomb raiders had, but they somehow stumbled upon this ancient tomb and allowed it to see the light of day again. Fair-faced flying dragon sighed. Tang Zheng looked at the magnificent palace as if he was looking at a mountain. This was the work of Emperor Qin. No wonder it was so shocking. This emperor was truly not someone that ordinary people could hope to reach. It was even possible to imagine. His thinking was far beyond the limits of a human. As a celestial as well, Tang Zheng could not help but feel ashamed of his inferiority. He was too inferior as a celestial. Let alone a godlike figure like Qiyu, even Qin Shi Huang was someone he could not compare to. He was usually proud of his achievements, but now he realized that his achievements were simply insignificant compared to this identity. It was even a bit laughable. He could not smile at all. There was a bitter taste in his mouth. However, he also felt that it was very strange. He had just learned of Emperor Qin's identity from the five-clawed golden dragon, and now he had accidentally stumbled into his tomb. Was this the will of the heavens? The shock in Professor Qi's heart far exceeded Tang Zheng's. There were many records of this ancient emperor in history, but many of them were vague and even mysterious. It was a secret that many historians could not find out even if they scratched their heads. Back then, the appearance of the terracotta warriors had shocked the world of archaeology, the world of history, and the world. No one would have thought that it was just the tip of the iceberg. What was even more shocking was that this was a project that could not be completed by human strength. Professor Qi remembered another mystery in the world of archaeology. That was Emperor Qin's tomb. There were many different opinions, but no one had a definite conclusion. He would never have thought that his tomb would be built in the vast Qinling Mountains, hidden deep in the heart of the mountains. No wonder no one had found it after such a long time. He could not help but think of some of the famous emperors in history. In order to prevent their tombs from being raided after their death, they had used all kinds of methods and set up all kinds of traps. But compared to Emperor Qin's tomb, it was simply child's play. Professor Qi pointed at the heavenly palace and asked, "Is Emperor Qin's coffin in the heavenly palace?" Fair-faced flying dragon nodded and said, "Yes." Professor Qi was overjoyed. He grabbed Tang Zheng's hand and said, "We must go to the heavenly palace, we must." Tang Zheng nodded. He also wanted to see this celestial from thousands of years ago. He wanted to see if he could learn more about the secrets of celestials. Fair-faced flying dragon interrupted Professor Qi's beautiful dream, only to hear him say coldly, "I'm afraid you don't have this life. However, to be buried here with Qin Shi Huang, to be disguised as an emperor for all eternity, this is a great honor." Tang Zheng stepped forward to protect Professor Qi and said, "You really can't wait to kill me? The longer we delay, the sooner we kill you, the better. In this world, there are too many idiots who don't make a move, and in the end, they will miss the opportunity. I, fair-faced flying dragon, am not that stupid." Tang Zheng's pupils shrank. Professor Qi was indeed a difficult person to deal with. "Professor Qi, when we fight later, if I can't defeat him, I will find an opportunity to put you down. Then, you can't turn back. Immediately run back the way you came, and then leave this tomb. Remember, don't look back." Tang Zheng whispered. Professor Qi's face changed drastically. He looked at the heavenly palace and said reluctantly, "Leave this place? Yes, your life is more important than anything else. Where there is life, there is hope." Tang Zheng tried his best to persuade him. He was afraid that Professor Qi would lose his temper. Professor Qi hesitated for a moment and then sighed. "Okay." Tang Zheng walked forward in large strides. When he was a few meters away from fair-faced flying dragon, he looked at him with shining eyes. Fair-faced flying dragon smiled and said, "Pay attention, my attack has begun." Tang Zheng had already paid 120% attention. Hearing these words, War's soul was already firmly grasped in his hand. The sporadic mottled light was unable to cover up the destructive light of War's soul. On the altar, there were only a few flashlights on the ground. They were not very bright, but for these two experts, it was enough to determine victory and defeat. It was enough to decide life and death. Although he had already paid enough attention, the moment fair-faced flying dragon's voice fell, Tang Zheng felt a despicable aura shoot towards him. He had not seen clearly what it was. He quickly raised War's soul. Ding! With a crisp sound, War's soul trembled non-stop. Tang Zheng's feet slipped and he almost fell back. War's soul buzzed non-stop, and Tang Zheng's arm went numb. It was just a single strike. Moreover, he had not seen clearly how powerful it was. This caused him to be extremely frightened. He quickly looked up and saw fair-faced flying dragon's finger in the air. That despicable aura shot towards him again. Tang Zheng did not sit still and wait for death. He leapt into the air and swoosh swoosh swoosh. War Soul slashed through the air. A cold light blossomed on War Soul's blade, creating dazzling sparks. Tang Zheng finally saw clearly that his opponent's weapon was a throwing knife. Chapter 732. Fair-faced flying dragon saw that his flying dagger missed, but his expression did not change. He said, "Not bad," as he quickly waved his arm. Swoosh, 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 a series of cold lights swept through the dark space. Tang Zheng felt a flash in front of his eyes, and the flying dagger was already flying towards him like a string of pearls, full of killing intent. Ding, ding, ding. The flying immortals from outer heaven's sword technique was displayed to the fullest. The sword light that filled the sky was like 1,000 zhang, illuminating the entire space. The two were secretly shocked in their hearts. Fair-faced flying dragon said in his heart that he was even more powerful than the legends made him out to be. Tang Zheng, on the other hand, had a strange expression. Just where did this fair-faced flying dragon come from? He was definitely an expert of the great scholar realm. Moreover, he did not seem like a first or second stage great scholar like Long Xinyuan. He was unable to determine this person's specific cultivation, but he was definitely a true expert. Tang Zheng had just experienced the battle between the State Master and Yamada no Orochi not long ago, so he was not unfamiliar with this level of battle. In fact, he was getting more and more used to it. The battle between the two became more and more intense. There were traces of the war spirit sword and the flying dagger on the altar. The dagger was like a chisel, severely damaging the altar. Seeing this, Professor Qi even had the heart to die. Tears were about to drip out as he shouted, "Destroyed, destroyed." The complicated patterns on the ground could definitely be studied to find many useful things, but it was destroyed just like that. As a scholar, one could imagine how painful it was. It was even more painful than killing him. However, the battle did not change according to his will. The two of them were bound to determine victory or defeat, or even, life and death. Although Tang Zheng was only at the 9th stage of fasting, and was still a step away from the Golden Core realm, his cultivation was lower than fair-faced flying dragons. However, he had the help of a divine weapon and was not at a disadvantage for a while. The sound of the battle was not small, and it was especially clear in this empty and deathly silent space. Suddenly, both of their ears twitched, and they subconsciously looked in a direction. They could not see anything in the darkness, but there was obviously something. As if to verify their guess, the sound became louder and louder. Bang, bang, bang. It was like a heavy object hitting the ground. It was like the sound of a drum, heavily pounding on people's hearts, causing their heartstrings to tremble. Even so, the two of them did not give up on the battle. Instead, the battle became more and more intense, and danger surrounded them. Professor Qi also heard the sound and stretched his neck to look outside the altar. Suddenly, his pupils dilated rapidly and his mouth opened wide. It was as if someone had grabbed his throat and he couldn't even let out a scream. When the two saw his reaction, they rushed to the edge of the altar at the same time and looked down. F***CK. Both of them cursed in their hearts at the same time as their scalps went numb. Countless people were standing on the ground below, all of them looking up at the altar. Bronze mask. Tang Zheng raised his head and exclaimed. Everyone was wearing the same bronze mask as the one in the painting, but there were too many bronze masks. Although Tang Zheng really wanted the bronze masks, this many still made his scalp go numb. Moreover, the empty eyes behind the bronze masks showed that these were definitely not living people. Not a living person. That was a dead person. In fact, they weren't even dead people. Tang Zheng had even been to the world of spirits and souls. Of course, he knew that there were many things in this world that he had never heard of or even thought of. Obviously, these people weren't good people. When they saw the three people on the altar, they sped up. Like monkeys, they climbed up the pillars of the altar and climbed up the altar at lightning speed. Tang Zheng and Fair-Faced Flying Dragon looked at each other at the same time and subconsciously stopped fighting. Fair-Faced Flying Dragon muttered to himself, "My attention was all attracted by the heavenly palace just now. I really didn't see so many things hidden below." Professor Chi's face was bitter as he sighed, "I'm afraid that you guys destroyed their altar, so they're coming to kill us." Altar? The two of them looked down subconsciously. Indeed, the altar was full of holes and scars. Huh! The two of them exclaimed at the same time and stared straight at the altar. It turned out that there was a faint light flowing in the altar, as if something had been triggered. "Looks like it's true." Tang Zheng sighed softly. Altars were very mysterious in ancient times, and the altar here was even more so. The two of them almost destroyed the altar. Of course, they must have triggered some mechanism to attract the group of bronze masks. "They're coming up." Professor Chi had been lying on the edge of the altar and yelled at the top of his lungs. The two of them tensed up. Fair-Faced Flying Dragon looked deeply at Tang Zheng and said, "Looks like we can't kill you today. Stay alive. The next time we meet, you won't be so lucky." Fair-Faced Flying Dragon leaped down from the altar as soon as he finished speaking. "Ah!" Professor Chi screamed. He didn't expect Fair-Faced Flying Dragon to walk right into his trap. Tang Zheng's face tensed up, but he didn't think so. Sure enough, the Fair-Faced Flying Dragon spread its wings like a rock and landed on the ground. The tip of its foot landed heavily on one of the bronze masks. With a loud bang, the bronze mask shattered into pieces and scattered all over the ground. Then, he did the same. Like a bird flying across the water, he flew above the bronze mask. Every time he landed, a bronze mask would be destroyed. Bang! Suddenly, a loud sound interrupted Tang Zheng's observation. He saw a bronze mask jump up the altar and crazily pounce at the two of them. They were wearing armor and looked like warriors. They were full of killing intent and gloomy. Tang Zheng's eyes were filled with killing intent. With a kacha sound, War Soul cut the opponent in half and scattered on the ground, turning into pieces. But before he could catch his breath, the sound of falling bodies came one after another. In the blink of an eye, the altar was densely packed with bronze masks. Their empty eyes and dense yin qi struck the heart. If it was a coward, they would have collapsed. Fortunately, Professor Chi had been in the field of archaeology for decades and had seen many strange things. Although he was afraid, he didn't completely lose his wolf. His attention was attracted by something else, the pieces scattered on the ground. Professor Chi picked up a piece and smelled it. He then carefully broke it and examined it carefully. Suddenly, his face changed. He shouted at Tang Zheng's back, "Tang Zheng, they are terracotta warriors." Terracotta warriors. Tang Zheng's first thought was the terracotta soldiers and horses. Their craftsmanship was as good as the heavens, shocking the hearts of people. But compared to the ones in front of him, those were too mediocre. At least, those terracotta warriors were dead and couldn't move on their own. These were living terracotta warriors, and they were quite lethal. Professor Chi couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. He praised, "It's too miraculous. Qin Shi Huang is indeed a great emperor. He actually created so many living terracotta figures. This is no longer something that can be done by humans. It's a miracle." Yes, in Professor Chi's mind, this was a miracle. It was not something that could be done by humans. Tang Zheng, on the other hand, saw some clues. These terracotta warriors were nourished by yin qi, accumulated over time, and experienced thousands of years to create such a spectacle. Just now, when he had just stepped onto the altar, he had already noticed that the yin qi on the altar was denser than in other places. It was as if it was water, filling the air. Obviously, other than offering sacrifices, this altar might also be used to collect the yin qi in the ancient tomb to nourish these terracotta warriors. In fact, along the way, Tang Zheng had been puzzled. This place was filled with yin qi, so how could there not be any yin soldiers or evil gong filthy things? Now, the answer was revealed. It turned out that the chi was all used to nourish these terracotta warriors. There was no extra to nurture those things. These terracotta warriors were not weaker than those things. More and more terracotta warriors climbed onto the altar like a flood. They were densely packed, numbering in the thousands. They had already completely occupied the altar. Tang Zheng took out the heaven-shocking bow and the sun-shooting arrow. There were too many enemies, and the War Soul sword might not be able to kill his way out. Tang Zheng, what should we do? Professor Qi asked fearfully. Hide behind me, and follow me to kill our way out. Tang Zheng said resolutely, as if he was alone, it would not be difficult to escape. But with Professor Qi by his side, all of this would be wishful thinking. Professor Qi mustered up all the courage in his body, preventing his legs from going soft from fear. He followed closely behind Tang Zheng. The terracotta warriors had already rushed over like a tidal wave. Their killing intent and chi covered the sky and earth, reaching a peak. Kill! Tang Zheng roared, the sun-shooting arrow left the bowstring, the surging chi instantly tore apart the few terracotta warriors at the front, and the terracotta warriors at the back followed closely behind, rushing over. Bang, bang, bang. The terracotta warriors continued to explode, filling the sky with fragments. Suddenly, a horse's neigh sounded out in this empty space. A war horse made of terracotta warriors soared into the air and flew up from below, its four hooves landing heavily on the altar. On the back of the horse sat a terracotta warrior. His attire was completely different from the other terracotta warriors, and he looked like a general. With a stretch of his hand, he grabbed the sun-shooting arrow that was flying towards him. The sun-shooting arrow was already at the end of its flight and did not have much power left. But even so, it could be seen that the other party was definitely not someone the other terracotta warriors could compare to. Tang Zheng's face changed slightly. One less sun-shooting arrow would be a huge loss, and he would definitely not allow this to happen. Thus, he leaped up, pulled Professor Qi, and flew over the densely packed terracotta warriors' heads, and rushed straight towards the general. A cold light flashed in the general's eyes. He placed the sun-shooting arrow on the war horse, and a long spear appeared in his hand. With a shake of the spear, he pierced towards Tang Zheng with the force of 1,000 kilograms. Tang Zheng was in the air, and beside him was a Professor Qi. His strength was greatly reduced, but he still reacted accordingly. He kept the heaven-shocking bow and used the War Soul sword instead. Clang! A muffled explosion sounded out, like a bolt from the blue, causing the surrounding terracotta warriors to sway. Chapter 733. Amidst the army of 10,000, the overwhelming killing intent and chi swept over like a tornado. The two of them were like small boats drifting in the wind, ready to fall apart at any moment. Kill! Tang Zheng roared. He was not one to go with the flow. He immediately summoned the four manifestations venerable. Its massive body immediately made the other terracotta figures look like ants. The four manifestations venerable had been heavily injured. Tang Zheng had yet to find a way to repair it, but it was still capable of basic physical defense and attack. With a leap, Tang Zheng pulled Professor Qi and drilled into the body of the four divine beasts, seizing the attacks that covered the sky and earth. The four divine beasts' body immediately rang out with ping 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 sounds. This was the first time Professor Qi had entered the four manifestations venerable. He was like Granny Lu entering the Grand View Garden. He wanted nothing more than to double his eyes and greedily observe his surroundings. Back then, he had personally witnessed the four manifestations' venerable strength in the 100,000 mountains. However, that was only a passing encounter. Moreover, that was outside and he was unable to enter the interior. Now that he had gotten what he wanted, he was like a child who had obtained his favorite toy. The corners of his mouth cracked open and he could not stop smiling foolishly. However, Tang Zheng was not as optimistic. His expression was extremely grim as he controlled the four manifestations venerable to charge towards the edge of the altar. How could the terracotta figures let him do as he pleased? The general swung his spear and the other terracotta figures let out soundless roars. Like maggots attached to the bones, they quickly climbed up the four manifestations venerable in an attempt to attack its vital points. Go to hell! Tang Jing angrily roared, and the four symbols venerable immediately waved his arms, sweeping away the terracotta figures that were climbing up his body. Ding ding dang dang, like rain hitting banana leaves, these terracotta figures fell to the ground one after another, shattering into pieces. However, it was still no match for the sheer number of terracotta figures. Before long, the terracotta figures had climbed all over the four manifestations venerable's body. They exerted force on its chest and head. Banging sounds rang out incessantly. The four manifestations venerable's strength had already been greatly reduced. Faced with such an attack, even Tang Jing felt like his heart had been struck by a heavy punch. His face paled. However, he did not give up. He swept the terracotta figures off his chest, then with a tap of his foot, he shot towards the edge of the altar like an arrow. He had succeeded. The four symbols venerable leaped into the air and rapidly descended to the ground. Roar! All of a sudden, a low roar exploded above their heads as the general galloped out of the altar. Bang! With a muffled thud, the warhorse actually landed on top of the four symbols venerable. Clang! The spear struck the top of the four symbols venerable's head. The tremendous force caused the four symbols venerable to fall even faster. Boom! After an earth-shattering boom, the four symbols venerable landed on the ground. Cracks spread out in all directions, and the terracotta figures on his body lost their balance and fell to the ground one after another. They were thrown off their feet and shattered into pieces. The four symbols knight wanted to run, but the general above him had accumulated another attack. The cold light of the spear flashed, and it looked like it was about to hit the four symbols knight again. Tang Zheng was well aware of the situation of the four divine beasts. If it had been in the past, it would have been invulnerable, but now it had been severely injured, and its strength had been greatly reduced. The force just now had almost split open the four symbols venerable's head. If it happened again, he couldn't guarantee that the four symbols venerable would still be safe and sound. Clearly, the enemy wouldn't show any mercy. Tang Jing hurriedly controlled the four symbols venerable and grabbed at the top of his head. Ka-cha! The warhorse was caught head-on and shattered into pieces. Even the shooting sun arrows fell into the large hand. The general had already flown up and dodged the attack, but the spear's attack didn't decrease in the slightest. Pooh! The spear pierced through the four symbols venerable's palm. Tang Zheng let out a heart-wrenching scream. When he looked down, he saw that his palm was also bleeding profusely. At this moment, he and the four symbols venerable had become one. Injuring the four symbols venerable was injuring him. He endured the pain and slapped down with his other hand. The huge palm immediately enveloped the other party in a shadow. The general hurriedly pulled back his spear, wanting to block the attack. However, the fingers of the injured palm closed and grabbed the spear, making it impossible for the general to pull back his spear to block. Seeing this, the general was shocked. He let go of his spear and raised both his hands to block. However, the strength of the four symbols venerable was ultimately not something he could resist. With a muffled bang, the general was flattened to the ground, leaving behind only fragments. Phew! Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. However, before he could rejoice, he saw the terracotta soldiers swarming over like a tide. Let's go! The four symbols venerable took large strides and rushed toward the celestial palace. At this moment, he couldn't care less about the spiritual energy on the bronze masks. Although the bronze masks were very tempting, they were like thorny roses. The four symbols venerable was extremely fast, and the terracotta soldiers were clearly unable to catch up. In the blink of an eye, they left the densely packed terracotta soldiers behind them. Suddenly, Tang Zheng listened attentively and frowned. Why is there no movement behind me? He turned his head curiously. Ah! He couldn't help but cry out in alarm. He saw that the densely packed terracotta soldiers had actually stopped their pursuit and were looking at him with hollow eyes from afar. What's going on? Why aren't they chasing me? Tang Jing couldn't figure it out and subconsciously looked up. The Celestial Palace. 2 huge words appeared above his head. These 2 words were floating, but there was no sign or anything like that. They just quietly floated above his head. He suddenly realized that he had unknowingly arrived in front of the Celestial Palace. There must be some kind of restriction on the Celestial Palace that prevented the terracotta soldiers from approaching. Since that was the case, there was no need to stay in the 4 symbols venerable anymore. He and Professor Chi left the 4 symbols venerable. Professor Chi was reluctant to leave. Although he didn't gain much, this kind of experience was too rare. Professor Chi sighed in disappointment as he watched the 4 symbols venerable disappear before his eyes. However, in an instant, he sucked in a breath of cold air. Then, as if he had been fixed in place, he looked up blankly. What was above his head? Of course, it was the Celestial Palace. Not just the 2 words Celestial Palace, but the actual Celestial Palace itself. When looking at the Celestial Palace from afar, one would be shocked by its majesty. Now that he was standing at the foot of the Celestial Palace, this feeling was especially strong. It was so shocking that he could barely find words to describe it. Tang Zhang's feelings were more or less the same. He saw that the Celestial Palace above his head was endless, as if it really towered into the clouds. Fair-faced flying dragon has already entered the Celestial Palace. Let's follow. Tang Zhang said resolutely. There was already no way out for the thousands of soldiers and horses behind them. Moreover, since they were already here, they naturally couldn't just leave without taking a look. Although they knew that there would be danger inside. Knowing that there was a tiger in the mountain, they still walked towards it. The 2 of them walked over confidently. The Celestial Palace's palace gate was very huge. It was even taller and bigger than the tomb gate. The 2 of them arrived in front of the palace gate. There was actually a corpse in front of the palace gate. Second brother Wu. The 2 of them recognized the corpse at the same time. Wasn't this the second brother Wu who had escaped without a trace? They didn't expect that he would actually escape to the front of the palace gate, but in the end, he didn't survive. Grave robbers deserve to die. Professor Chi sighed. Ignoring second brother Wu, the 2 of them focused on the palace gate. The palace gate was tightly shut. Tang Zheng pushed with both hands, but the gate didn't move an inch. His expression changed slightly as he sighed faintly. Professor Chi, we can only rely on you. Since Professor Chi could open the tomb gate, then perhaps he could also open the palace gate. Professor Chi walked forward and said while surveying, Fair-faced flying dragon is much earlier than us. Could it be that he has already entered? He's so familiar with this place. It wouldn't be strange if he had already entered. Tang Zheng said indifferently. Just who is this person? Professor Chi was also very curious. Tang Zheng shook his head solemnly. This person was too strange. Not only did he know him, but he also wanted to kill him. When did he offend such an expert? How come he didn't know? Only fair-faced flying dragon could answer this question. Perhaps they would meet again in the Celestial Palace later on. They would definitely face off against each other, and perhaps it would really be a life and death battle. Time passed minute by minute as Professor Chi focused on studying the palace gate. Tang Zheng was bored to death and focused on observing the surroundings. The ancient tomb was originally quite dark, but it seemed that the stars in the sky were sprinkling down starlight, making the place much brighter than the altar. It was like the first glimmer of dawn. In short, the Celestial Palace's majestic silhouette could be clearly seen. Crack. Suddenly, a strange sound interrupted Tang Zheng's thoughts. He saw the Celestial Palace's gate open little by little. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. It was a wise move to bring Professor Chi with him. Otherwise, he would have entered the Celestial Palace no matter what. The palace gate opened wide. Tang Zheng and Professor Chi looked at each other excitedly and cautiously walked in. The interior of the Celestial Palace was as bright as day. As soon as they entered, they saw majestic terracotta soldiers standing on both sides. However, the yin energy on these terracotta soldiers wasn't dense enough. They hadn't come back to life. Tang Zhang and Professor Chi's hearts were in their throats. If these terracotta soldiers came back to life and attacked, the two of them would have offended them. After passing through the long corridor, the scene in front of them suddenly opened up. There were pavilions, small bridges, flowing water, fake mountains, and lakes. It really did look like a magnificent palace. The two of them smacked their lips and exclaimed, "The celestial palace really lives up to its name." It was built according to ancient palaces. Professor Chi's eyes were rolling. He almost couldn't see. His mouth was wide open and dazzled. He was so happy that he almost fainted. This kind of spectacle was hard to come by in a lifetime. He felt that he was really lucky to be blessed by the heavens to be able to see such a scene in his lifetime. This palace is in the style of the pre-Qin dynasty. This is really the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang. Professor Chi came to this conclusion while trembling. The two of them went around the exquisite pavilions and went deep into the celestial palace. A tall staircase was placed in front of them. The staircase seemed to have no end, as if it extended into the sky. Tang Zheng subconsciously thought of the staircase to heaven. Perhaps this was the feeling that it gave people in the beginning. It went straight up into the sky. The two of them began a long journey to conquer these stairs. Professor Chi was panting like a cow and almost couldn't climb. He had to rely on Tang Zheng's support to finally reach the top. Chapter 734. Seeing fair-faced flying dragon again, both of them could not help but tense up. At the same time, both of them were attracted by the coffin. Qin Shi Huang's coffin. The same thought popped into their minds at the same time. This was something that many people dreamed of, and they did not expect to find it. Qin Shi Huang had too many secrets, and his coffin might be able to give them many answers. Professor Chi could not wait to rush up and check it out. However, he was afraid of fair-faced flying dragon, so he had to suppress this strong impulse. "What do we do?" Professor Chi asked in a low voice. Before Tang Zheng could answer, fair-faced flying dragon had already turned his head and looked over. Both of them were shocked. Tang Zheng was ready to fight, but fair-faced flying dragon turned his head again and stared straight at the coffin, ignoring the two. Both of them were slightly surprised. This was not fair-faced flying dragon style. That coffin. Could it be that there was something special about it? "Let's go." Tang Zheng made a decision. Professor Chi was overjoyed. "Okay." Thus, the two of them carefully approached the coffin, but fair-faced flying dragon still did not react. Finally, they arrived in front of the coffin and were only a few steps away from fair-faced flying dragon. However, when they saw what was in front of them, they could no longer care about fair-faced flying dragon. They finally understood why fair-faced flying dragon had such a reaction. There were two coffins in front of them. Could there be someone else buried in Qin Shi Huang's tomb besides Qin Shi Huang? Who could it be? Who had the qualifications? At that moment, the three of them were filled with this question, and fair-faced flying dragon was no exception. He stared at the coffin in a daze, not knowing what to do. After Professor Chi recovered from his shock, he was extremely excited. This was definitely a discovery that would shock the world. This trip was worth it. He could not help but reach out and touch the coffin. "Stop!" Fair-faced flying dragon saw this and screamed in shock. Professor Chi retracted his hand as if he had been electrocuted. Before he could understand what was going on, he heard a voice coming from the coffin. "There's movement inside." Tang Zheng and Professor Chi were shocked at the same time. Could it be that there was also a living thing inside? Qin Shi Huang? A few thousand years had passed, could it be that he was still alive? Tang Zheng was awestruck. Didn't the five-clawed golden dragon swear that Qin Shi Huang had committed too many sins and was not tolerated by the heavenly Tao and finally died? Then why would there be movement in the coffin? Fair-faced flying dragon's face turned ashen as he roared, "You are causing trouble, do you know that?" What do you mean? Tang Zheng shielded Professor Qi and asked. He is alive. Alive? Tang Zheng and Professor Qi exclaimed in unison. Yes, as long as his coffin is stained with the aura of a living person, he will be revived. Otherwise, why do you think I'm standing here? Fair-faced flying dragon said bitterly. Coming back from the dead? How is that possible? Furthermore, it happened a few years ago. Although Tang Zheng was a cultivator, he had never seen such a miraculous thing. Fair-faced flying dragon coldly snorted and said, You are a cultivator, don't you understand that there are all kinds of strange things in this world? I'm sorry. I didn't know. Professor Qi said with grievance. Fair-faced flying dragon acted as if he didn't hear anything. With a tap of his foot, he quickly retreated to the bottom of the stairs. Tang Zheng was alerted and inwardly cursed. Qin Shi Huang was a celestial and an emperor. Just how high was his cultivation base? Tang Zheng couldn't imagine. Moreover, he killed people like flies. How could he let these people go when they trespassed into his tomb? Danger, retreat. Tang Zheng pulled Professor Qi and prepared to retreat down the stairs. However, a loud sound interrupted his movements. The coffin lid flew high up into the air and an earth-shattering killing intent leaked out from the coffin. In an instant, this small area was completely enveloped by this killing intent. It caused people to involuntarily tremble and Tang Zheng even began to hallucinate. It was as if there was an army of thousands of horses charging towards him, wanting to tear him to pieces. He knew something was wrong and hurriedly bit his tongue. The sharp pain immediately woke him up from the hallucination. Professor Qi wasn't so lucky. His eyes were dull and he lost consciousness. Whoosh! A black shadow flew out from the coffin and floated in the air, staring straight at Tang Zheng and Professor Qi. Tang Zheng was shocked. This person was no different from a living person, but the killing intent on his body was definitely something that could only be created by a true 10,000 slaughterer. Moreover, his attire was very similar to the attire of Qin Shi Huang that Tang Zheng had seen in the textbooks before, but it was more dignified. Just one look from him would probably scare some timid people to the point of breaking their guts. How dare you? Who are you? How dare you break into my tomb? The other party finally spoke. His voice was like a bell, echoing in people's ears for a long time. Tang Zheng's heart thumped. He finally confirmed that the other party was the famous Qin Shi Huang. He had really been resurrected. His face immediately turned pale. He couldn't tell if it was a blessing or a curse to resurrect such an ancient emperor. Seeing that they didn't respond, Qin Shi Huang said eerily, Trespassing into the forbidden area means only death for you. You are lucky to die in my hands. As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Shi Huang pulled out a treasured sword from his waist. When the blade was unsheathed, the sound of the sword was extremely loud, like the sound of a horn on a battlefield. The Taya sword. Fair-faced flying dragon's expression finally changed when he saw the sword. He couldn't help but cry out. Tang Zheng's pupils shrank. Although he didn't know the origin of the Taya sword, it was obvious that as Qin Shi Huang's sword, it was definitely not an ordinary item. You actually recognize my Taya sword. Qin Shi Huang looked at fair-faced flying dragon in surprise and clicked his tongue in wonder. Fair-faced flying dragon's expression didn't change. Of course he would recognize the Taya sword because he had come for it. According to legend, the Taya sword was created by an ancient swordsmith. It was a true divine weapon that accompanied Qin Shi Huang on his expeditions and drank the blood of countless people. It was a very powerful weapon that ordinary people couldn't use. In the end, the Taya sword was buried with Qin Shi Huang as a burial item. However, the Taya sword's illustrious reputation was still passed down through various channels. Fair-faced flying dragon couldn't forget the Taya sword when he heard the news. When he heard about the ancient tomb this time, he guessed that it was most likely the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the one he had been looking for all this time. If he had the Taya sword, it would be like adding wings to a tiger for him. Therefore, he came here without hesitation. But seeing the Taya sword in Qin Shi Huang's hands, he felt despair. Although he was very confident in his own strength, he still didn't have the confidence to face Qin Shi Huang. Qin Shi Huang was a legendary figure, an emperor throughout the ages. He was simply too powerful, and no one had much courage to resist him. Although Tang Zheng understood the difference in strength, he still had to resist. Especially when he saw his opponent waving the Taya sword, he hurriedly used War Soul to block. Clang! In just one move, Tang Zheng was sent flying and crashed into another coffin. Puff! He spat out a mouthful of blood, dyeing the coffin red. Not even being able to receive a single move from Qin Shi Huang made Tang Zheng feel a mix of emotions. Although they were both Skywalkers, the difference was too great. Humph, you dare to come to my tomb with such weak strength? You're courting death. Qin Shi Huang said disdainfully. He wasn't in a hurry to kill Tang Zheng. Instead, he turned and stared at fair-faced flying dragon. As for Professor Qi, he didn't even look at him. He didn't even need to look at such an ordinary person. Now it's your turn. Qin Shi Huang said to fair-faced flying dragon. Fair-faced flying dragon's face was ashen. He knew he couldn't escape today, but he didn't run. In front of Qin Shi Huang, running would only lead to a faster death. He took a deep breath and strode towards Qin Shi Huang. The Taya sword hasn't drunk human blood for a long time. Today, I'll use your blood to reseal it. Qin Shi Huang flew toward fair-faced flying dragon. So. A series of flying knives shot toward Qin Shi Huang. The cold light formed a string, and the whistling sound of air breaking rang out. Insignificant skill. Qin Shi Huang said disdainfully. The Taya sword slashed through the air, and all the flying knives were split into two. Fair-faced flying dragon's eyes flashed with despair. In this world, his strength was already at the peak. But in front of an ancient emperor, he was like a baby, unable to withstand a single blow. Boom! The Taya sword slashed through the air, and the sword light slashed down. More than half of the stairs were destroyed, and rocks flew everywhere, leaving behind a long and deep ravine. Fair-faced flying dragon dodged to the side in a sorry state. His exquisite clothes had a few large holes, and there was a trace of blood on his face. He was completely different from his previous high-spirited self. Tang Zheng saw this scene from afar, but he didn't gloat. He only felt a deep sense of helplessness. Was he really going to die here today? No. He would never give up. Even at the last moment, he would never give up. Seeing that Qin Shi Huang's attention was attracted by fair-faced flying dragon, he crawled up with difficulty. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and took out the heaven-shocking bow and shooting sun arrows. He knocked an arrow and aimed the shooting sun arrows at Qin Shi Huang's back. Fair-faced flying dragon's gaze went past Qin Shi Huang and coincidentally saw this scene. His heart moved. Although the two of them were enemies, but facing Qin Shi Huang, who was an even stronger enemy, the two of them had to work together. Without any verbal agreement, the two of them formed an alliance. Fair-faced flying dragon soared into the sky and waved his arm, roaring, "Heavenly maiden scattering flowers." In an instant, the sky was filled with flying daggers that shot towards Qin Shi Huang from all directions. At the same time, Tang Zheng's fingers released the bowstring. With a wang sound, the shooting sun arrows left the bowstring. With flying knives in front and shooting sun arrows behind, it was a pincer attack. Qin Shi Huang acted as if he didn't even see it. He gently raised the Taya sword. In that instant, the sky changed color. The entire space seemed to have frozen. The shooting sun arrows and flying knives seemed to have been frozen. Chapter 735. The light disappeared, and everything returned to normal. Flying dagger? It turned into pieces and scattered all over the ground. Sun shooting arrow? It landed on the ground, dim and lifeless. Qin Shi Huang stood proudly, floating in the air, maintaining the posture of swinging his sword. Tang Zheng and Fair-Faced Flying Dragon attacked from the front and back, but they were unable to do anything to Qin Shi Huang. Their expressions involuntarily became even more unsightly. Qin Shi Huang looked down at Fair-Faced Flying Dragon and said, "You guys are too weak." Before he finished speaking, the Taiya sword flew out, shooting straight towards Fair-Faced Flying Dragon. Fair-Faced Flying Dragon retreated in panic, retreating again and again like a tornado, disappearing without a trace in a short while. However, the Taiya sword was like a shadow, chasing after it relentlessly, disappearing together with it. Qin Shi Huang did not seem to care at all. He turned around and fixed his gaze on Tang Zheng. With a wave of his hand, the sun-shooting arrow on the ground flew into his hands. His large hand gently brushed past the sun-shooting arrow, and he clicked his tongue in wonder. "Heaven-shocking bow, sun-shooting arrow, you actually have these two divine armaments. Your luck is not small. However, you are too weak. It is impossible for you to protect these two divine armaments." Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched. The other party actually recognized these two weapons. "I will grant you a quick death. Die." After Qin Shi Huang finished speaking, he had already arrived in front of Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng did not even see how the other party moved, and his chest was hit heavily by a palm, causing him to fiercely fall onto the coffin. He spat out a mouthful of blood, dyeing the coffin red. All the bones in Tang Zheng's body were about to fall apart, his internal organs were displaced, and blood kept flowing out from the corner of his mouth. He had experienced so many dangers, but this time was the most serious. He had no strength to resist, and he was already heavily injured, to the point where he could not even draw the heaven-shocking bow. He wanted to summon the four symbols venerable, but the four symbols venerable was already heavily injured. He was afraid that it would be difficult for him to support himself, and he might even be torn apart by Qin Shi Huang. Even if he were to die, he did not want the four symbols venerable to accompany him in death. "Your resistance to attacks isn't bad," Qin Shi Huang praised. "If an ordinary person were to take this attack of mine, they would have been smashed to pieces." Tang Zheng laughed bitterly in his heart. This was of course the effect of the chaotic Vajra mantra. He had already cultivated to the iron bones realm, and his bones were as hard as steel, but they were still about to fall apart. This showed just how powerful Qin Shi Huang's attacks were. However, he's still too weak. Only death awaits him. With that said, Qin Shi Huang's palm pressed over again. This time, Tang Zheng could clearly see the trajectory of his attack, but strangely, he still couldn't dodge. He could only watch as the pair of hands attacked. It's over. This was the only thought left in his mind. That was because even though this attack seemed slow, its offensive power had clearly increased explosively. If he took this palm, even if his bones were made of iron, they would still shatter. He gritted his teeth and didn't beg for mercy. He didn't shrink back. He was like a warrior who would rather die than submit. He stood there proudly. Even if he had to die, he couldn't die like a coward. Bang! With a loud sound, Tang Zheng felt as if his eardrums were about to burst. His chest was struck by a powerful force, and although it was uncomfortable, it was not fatal. Obviously, this was not the power of Qin Shi Huang's attack. He subconsciously lowered his head to look. The Qin First Emperor's palm was right in front of his chest, but there was still a fine line between it and his chest. This was because a white hand had passed through his ribs and blocked the Qin First Emperor's large hand. The difference between the two palms, one big and one small, was obvious. However, this pair of weak and small palms blocked Qin Shi Huang's attack without trembling at all. Qin Shi Huang retreated, his expression fluctuating. His pupils widened as he stared straight at Tang Zheng. Behind him, Tang Zheng also felt that something was amiss. A ball of yin qi enveloped his back, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head in the middle of winter. It was bone-chilling. However, what surprised him was that this wave of yin qi was not completely like ordinary yin qi. Waves of strange energy drilled into his pores and flowed into his 8 extraordinary meridians. Pure yin qi. His eyes lit up as he finally recognized this familiar thing. This wave of yin qi actually contained pure yin qi. This was something that Tang Zheng yearned for even in his dreams. Most importantly, it was impossible for yin qi to contain pure yin qi. This was also why he had to rely on absorbing pure yin qi from a woman to neutralize pure yang qi, and not simply absorbing yin qi. That way, he wouldn't have to be so troubled and distressed. He knew that there was someone behind him, and it was a woman. A woman with such heavy yin qi, could it be a female ghost? No, of course not. She was a living person. He could already hear the sound of his heartbeat. How could another person suddenly appear in this tomb, and it was a woman, an expert that could block Qin Shi Huang? Before he could turn his head, Qin Shi Huang's voice had already sounded, Empyrean Fairy. How did you wake up? Empyrean Fairy. Tang Zheng had never heard of these words. Hearing this name, it seemed that her background was not small, but he had never heard of such a person in the Jianghu. No, she woke up. Tang Zheng finally grasped the crux of the matter. This word was too important. Could it be that this Empyrean Fairy had been sleeping all this time? He slowly turned his head and glanced at the coffin from the corner of his eyes. He didn't know when, but it had already been opened, and there were still traces of his blood on the coffin. Finally, he clearly saw the person behind him. A beautiful face, and a classical beauty, filled with holiness and coldness, giving people a feeling of being thousands of miles away. This kind of beauty seemed to not exist in the human world, but in the 9 heavens. What made Tang Zheng even more surprised was the yin qi that was continuously emitted from her body, as well as the pure yin qi that was contained within. This was much more dense and pure than the pure yin qi he had encountered before. Fang Shishir had a pure yin body, Lu Qingmei had a profound yin body, and Marshall had a yin fiend body. The pure yin qi in their bodies could not be compared to this person's. His heart skipped a beat as he remembered a body type that Tian Chanzi had once introduced, the saint body of 9 yin. The saint body of 9 yin was the same as the saint body of 9 yang. They were the strangest and most magical body types in the world. Many people often died young, unable to grow up. Therefore, these two types of body types were extremely rare in the world. Tang Zheng had never thought that he would see someone with this type of body type, let alone in this ancient tomb. For a moment, he had mixed feelings. If he absorbed the pure yin qi in the saint body of 9 yin, then his pure yang qi would definitely be neutralized by a large portion. But looking at her face that kept people away, his thoughts suddenly disappeared. This Empyrean Fairy was too strong, so strong that it was suffocating. Even Tang Zheng felt that he was very small in front of her. Without a doubt, the Empyrean Fairy was lying in the other coffin. Why was she lying in there? What was her relationship with Qin Shi Huang? Could it be that she was also a person from thousands of years ago? How could so many people from thousands of years ago suddenly appear? However, when he thought about the appearance of Hundred Faces Star, a person from the ancient era tens of thousands of years ago, these two people did not seem that difficult to accept. Why did the Empyrean Fairy want to save him? Wasn't she in cahoots with Qin Shi Huang? The Empyrean Fairy ignored Tang Zheng's gaze and stared coldly at Qin Shi Huang. She said, "Ingzheng, you sealed me when I was unprepared. Today, I will return what you did to me in double." Sealed? Tang Zheng suddenly understood. No wonder the Empyrean Fairy wanted to save him. It turned out that she and Qin Shi Huang were not in cahoots, but enemies. But why did Qin Shi Huang seal her and bury her in this tomb together? There were many doubts. Qin Shi Huang's expression changed for the first time. He arrogantly said, "Empyrean Fairy, when I asked you to dual cultivate with me, it could help us both return to our peak. You refused many times. Seeing that my time is almost up, if I don't seal you and bury you here with me, when I revive in the future, my pure yang energy will erupt. How can I live? Shameless." The Empyrean Fairy's eyes emitted a terrifying cold light as she spoke with killing intent. The 9 yang saint body should be with the 9 yin saint body. This is the way of the heavens. Moreover, I am an emperor above millions of people and also a celestial. Could it be that I am not worthy of you? You will never be worthy. The Empyrean fairy did not give him any face as she firmly said. Tang Zhang's heart skipped a beat. To dare to refute Qin Shi Huang like this, how much courage did she need? However, he finally understood the ins and outs of the matter. Qin Shi Huang did not obtain the Empyrean fairy back then. His time was almost up and he did not have a way to live, so he buried the Empyrean fairy with him here. When he had a chance to revive in the future, he would think of a way to dual cultivate with the Empyrean fairy and increase his cultivation. This dream was beautiful. If Tang Zheng did not interfere, perhaps his wish would have been fulfilled. Qin Shi Huang was rejected in front of an outsider. He immediately felt that he had lost a lot of face and glared at Tang Zheng with killing intent. Tang Zheng innocently rolled his eyes, but he did not back down. Empyrean fairy, how did you break through my seal? Qin Shi Huang temporarily swallowed his anger. He thought that he would definitely tear this eyesore of a young man into 10,000 pieces. He then asked the Empyrean fairy. The mysterious maiden of the 9 heavens did not immediately answer. Instead, she looked at Tang Zheng with a complicated gaze. Her eyes were filled with splendor, and the corner of her mouth slightly curled up. Zheng, you claim to be smarter than everyone in the world. The answer is clearly right in front of you, but you don't know it at all. What do you mean? Qin Shi Huang did not understand. Do you really think that you are the only celestial in this world? Of course. Only one celestial appears every few thousand years. Then how many years have you spent outside? This. Qin Shi Huang was stumped. I think you are not smart but too stupid. The outside world must have already passed many years ago. That new celestial will naturally appear. Impossible. Qin Shi Huang's eyes flashed with a hint of panic as he denied. Everything is right in front of you, but you don't know anything. Look at you, you are the stupidest person in the world. Look at what special trait he has. The 9th heaven mystical maiden pointed at Tang Zheng. Chapter 736. Qin Shi Huang stared at Tang Zheng as if he was looking at a ghost. He roared in disbelief, no. How could he be a celestial? Impossible, this is definitely impossible, there must be a mistake, a mistake. To be able to make an emperor panic like this, it could be seen how big of an impact it had on his heart. In truth, the reason why Qin Shi Huang was able to unify the world and become a hegemon was because of his identity as a celestial. Thus, he knew what this identity meant. Not even in his dreams would he have thought that he would immediately meet another celestial after reviving. When two of the same kind met, there was no appreciation, only hatred. Killing intent surged out from Qin Shi Huang's body. In an instant, it was as if heaven and earth had changed color. So what if he is a celestial? He is so weak, I can kill him with a single finger. Qin Shi Huang's words were not false. If the two of them fought one-on-one, Tang Zheng would not be his opponent no matter what. Seeing Qin Shi Huang's huge reaction, Tang Zheng was shocked, but he also understood that his identity had already caused the other party to be filled with intense killing intent. If he wanted to escape from the ancient tomb, it would be even more difficult. The Empyrean fairy walked out from behind Tang Zheng. Her slender body contained an extremely powerful strength, causing Tang Zheng to feel inferior. Since you know his identity, you should be able to guess why I have awakened. Hearing that, Qin Shi Huang's gaze turned and stared at the blood on the coffin. That was precisely Tang Zheng's blood. Qin Shi Huang's eyes flashed with unwillingness. If he had known Tang Zheng's identity, he definitely would not have let him get close to the coffin. He would have directly killed him. It turned out that when Qin Shi Huang had sealed the Empyrean fairy, only the blood of a celestial could undo the seal. Qin Shi Huang was very confident, thinking that he was the only celestial in the world. Other than him, no one else could undo the seal on the Empyrean fairy. But due to a freak combination of factors, a few thousand years later, Tang Zheng appeared. His blood actually undid the seal without anyone knowing, allowing the Empyrean fairy to awaken. Empyrean fairy, so what if you've awakened? You weren't a match for me back then. Could it be that you're a match for me now? Humph, I won't be soft-hearted anymore. Whether you agree or not, you belong to me. Your 9 saint body will belong to me. Qin Shi Huang's eyebrows were raised in exultation as he spoke unrestrainedly. The Empyrean fairy's expression changed slightly. She said, shameless. You couldn't get away with it thousands of years ago, and you won't get away with it now. I would rather give it to him than to you. When Qin Shi Huang heard this, he was furious. His murderous intent and anger rushed towards Tang Zheng. The Empyrean fairy stepped forward and blocked all of this. Tang Zheng listened to the conversation between the two in a daze, and his heart was in turmoil. Especially when he heard the ninth heaven profound maiden say that she would rather give herself to him than let Qin Shi Huang take advantage of her. His mind was greatly shaken, and he was extremely excited. But then, Qin Shi Huang's anger made him understand that this matter was not as easy as he thought. Qin Shi Huang wanted to tear him into pieces. It was better to throw such unrealistic thoughts to the back of his mind as soon as possible. Empyrean fairy, you don't accept me, but you're willing to let this good-for-nothing boy take advantage of you. Humph, women are indeed stupid. Then I don't need to give you face. The first emperor of Qin said fiercely before disappearing. The Empyrean fairy raised her jade-like arm and pointed at the void. Boom! A hurricane-like berserk aura appeared out of nowhere, blowing Tang Zheng so hard that he couldn't help but close his eyes. Then, he heard a thunderous rumbling sound and everything returned to normal. When he opened his eyes again, he found Qin Shi Huang standing in the distance with blood on the corner of his mouth. The Empyrean fairy was standing in front of him with a pale face. She had already retreated a few steps and was almost sticking to his body. How are you? Tang Zheng asked with concern. I'm fine. I'll hold him back. You can leave. The Empyrean fairy was expressionless and said with a cold tone. Leave? Tang Zheng almost blurted out, okay, but he resisted the temptation and firmly shook his head. How can a man like me let a woman hold the enemy back while I escape? The Empyrean fairy didn't appreciate it at all and coldly said, idiot. After saying this, she no longer paid attention to Tang Zheng and charged at Qin Shi Huang. Her long sleeves fluttered in the wind. Her ancient clothing perfectly complemented her figure and temperament, making her look like a fairy. Empyrean fairy, after thousands of years, your strength is still inferior to mine. Moreover, you don't have the help of a treasure, so how can you be my opponent? Qin Shi Huang laughed wildly. The Empyrean fairy said, you stole my treasure. Not only are you cruel and inhumane, you are also a bandit. You dare to insult me like this. If it was anyone else, they would have already died. However, I won't let you die. You are still very useful. I will rely on you to complete my divine technique. Qin Shi Huang also charged over. The two people soared into the air and began to fight in midair. The world changed color and the mountains shook. It was unknown how many steps were destroyed and the coffin had long been destroyed. Tang Zheng raised his head and stared blankly at this pair of experts. He incessantly circulated his Jin Qi in an attempt to repair his body. His body was already heavily injured and he had to take this opportunity to repair it as soon as possible. Time slowly passed and the two people's battle didn't stop. However, the Empyrean fairy was gradually losing her strength. She couldn't do anything by herself. Professor Qi had long since been knocked unconscious by the shaking of the mountains and earth. He laid on the ground and lost consciousness. Tang Zheng couldn't help, so he simply sat down cross-legged and quickly circulated his divine technique. The ancient clear heaven scroll and dragon god technique immediately activated. Although the outside world was shaking and it was like the end of the world, Tang Zheng's mind was completely focused. His heart had reached an unprecedented level of peace. Forgetting everything. He was like an outsider, calm and collected as he healed his injuries step by step. The Empyrean fairy glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. Her eyes flashed with praise. As expected, Skywalkers were not ordinary people. Even if their cultivation was not high, this state of mind was something that ordinary people couldn't reach. Seeing the Empyrean fairy's gaze, Qin Shi Huang was furious. He roared, "You still dare to look at him? Then I'll kill him first." Whoosh! He directly pounced on Tang Zheng. He was so fast that even the Empyrean fairy couldn't block him. Tang Zheng was completely unaware. His Jin Qi nourished his body bit by bit and his injuries were already somewhat healed. "Stop!" the Empyrean fairy shouted. Her figure flashed and blocked in front of Tang Zheng. Bang! Qin Shi Huang's palm directly landed on the Empyrean fairy's shoulder. Like a kite with a broken string, she flew out and collided with Tang Zheng. She was lying on top of Tang Zheng while Tang Zheng was lying on the ground. Tang Zheng was interrupted. He suddenly opened his eyes and found that the Empyrean fairy was right in front of him. That beautiful face was almost touching his face. Moreover, the two's posture was a bit strange. One was lying down and the other was lying down. No matter how he looked at it, it was not suitable for children. Who? His breathing couldn't help but become hurried. The hot air that he exhaled hit the Empyrean fairy's face. Her face immediately became colder and colder. Her eyes were cold like 1,000-year-old ice. "I'm sorry," Tang Zheng said in shame. She had sacrificed herself to save him. But he was like this. It was really too unreasonable. "You too?" Qin Shi Huang was dumbfounded. What a scandal. "Brat, I'm going to kill you." He had a strong desire to possess an ancient person, especially an emperor. The two's posture was like a slap to the face. His face and ears were red, and his eyes were almost spitting fire. The Empyrean fairy calmly got up from Tang Zheng's body and wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. She had just taken a blow from Qin Shi Huang and it didn't feel good. Tang Zheng also quickly stood up. Bam! Something rolled out from his backpack and attracted everyone's attention. The stately painting. Tang Zheng's heart trembled. The stately painting couldn't be stored in his summer pouch. It had always been in his backpack. He didn't expect it to fall out. This was a treasure. He definitely couldn't let it fall into Qin Shi Huang's hands. He was about to bend down to pick it up. Swoosh! The painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and vale flew away right under his nose. He turned pale with fright and hurriedly looked up, only to see that the painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and vale did not fly to Qin Shi Huang. Instead, it fell into the hands of the ninth heaven maiden. The Empyrean fairy's face was finally no longer frozen. She showed some joy. Her jade-like fingers gently stroked the stately painting. When Qin Shi Huang saw this, he was shocked and shouted, "The stately painting! Brat, you actually have the stately painting." Tang Zheng looked at him blankly. He thought to himself, why can't I have the stately painting? However, when he saw Qin Shi Huang's expression change, Tang Zheng realized more clearly that this treasure was extraordinary. What was so magical about the stately painting? He waited and saw. The Empyrean fairy finally raised her head and said, "Ingzheng, you just said that I don't have a magic treasure and I'm not your match. You didn't expect the stately painting to return to its rightful owner, did you?" Qin Shi Huang's expression changed. He was speechless. "Back then, you sealed me and took away my stately painting. Although I don't know what you did with the stately painting, it is finally back in my hands." Qin Shi Huang couldn't help but feel regret. Due to the uniqueness of the stately painting, he had purposely hidden the information of his tomb in the stately painting. This was so that when the stately painting was opened, not only would the descendants be able to find his tomb, but they would also be able to bring the stately painting into the ancient tomb. In this way, he could be resurrected and not let this treasure be lost. It could be said that he killed two birds with one stone. However, he didn't expect that Tang Zheng would bring the stately painting and awaken the Empyrean fairy. In the end, the stately painting returned to its rightful owner due to a freak combination of factors. Everything seemed to be predestined. Qin Shi Huang's scheming did not fulfill his wish in the end. Tang Zheng, on the other hand, was overjoyed. Although the stately painting was a rare treasure, he was not disappointed or disheartened because it was returned to its rightful owner. Instead, he was incomparably excited. A powerhouse like the mysterious Lady of the Ninth Heaven should have such an extraordinary treasure. Chapter 737. The Empyrean fairy opened her hands slowly, and the stately painting unfurled bit by bit. A beautiful painting appeared before her eyes. Mountains, rivers, lakes, and peaks stacked on top of each other. It was beautiful and mysterious. The Empyrean fairy's eyes became colder and colder. Zheng, today, I will return to you what you did to me 100 times over. As soon as she finished speaking, the stately painting flew into the air. Thousands of rays of light soared into the sky, illuminating the celestial palace as bright as day. A mysterious power rippled out. Qin Shi Huang's expression became unprecedentedly serious. He grabbed at the void and roared, "Taya sword!" Obviously, he didn't dare to be careless in front of the stately painting. He dared to use his weapon, Taya sword. Taya's sword was used to hunt down fair-faced flying dragon and disappeared without a trace. However, Qin Shi Huang was very confident, so he didn't panic. But at this moment, when he shouted the 3 words, Taya's sword, his expression changed. He hurriedly turned to look in the direction fair-faced flying dragon had fled, but there was no trace of Taya's sword. Where is Taya's sword? He clearly felt a connection with Taya's sword, but in the next second, that connection was abruptly cut off. It was as if someone had forcibly cut it off. He knew very well what this meant. 9. Taya's sword was out of his control. It was very likely that fair-faced flying dragon, who he didn't care about at all, had used some method to snatch it away. This was like pulling a tooth from the tiger's mouth. It was a brazen provocation. Ah! He roared into the sky. I will kill all of you, kill all of you. The Empyrean fairy looked at him with a faint smile. Qin Shi Huang, you have exhausted all your tricks, and in the end, even Taya's sword was taken away. Do you still have the right to be called an eternal emperor? Qin Shi Huang's expression was extremely ugly. He roared hysterically, Empyrean fairy, don't think that I won't kill you. The Empyrean fairy was not afraid at all. I will kill you too. After that, she pointed forward with her slender hand. The stately painting flew to the top of Qin Shi Huang's head, and a strong suction force suddenly appeared. Who? It was as if a black hole had appeared in the sky. The ruins on the ground were sucked into the stately painting in the blink of an eye. The first emperor of Qin swayed and stomped his feet. His feet sank into the stone slabs to resist the shocking suction force above his head. Empyrean fairy, you're dreaming if you want to absorb me into the painting to refine me. Qin Shi Huang said proudly. Even if you don't have the Taya sword, you can forget about killing me. After a slight pause, Qin Shi Huang took a deep breath and roared, Monarch Fist. Boom! A huge fist rushed into the sky. Although it was still a long distance away from the painting, it was obvious that the painting was shaking violently. The Empyrean fairy was already injured, and her strength was slightly weaker. When she saw the fist hit the painting of mountains and rivers, her breath became chaotic, and she almost couldn't hold on. Monarch Fist is indeed extraordinary, the Empyrean fairy said coldly, but she didn't back down at all. She shouted, 5 mountain suppression. The stately painting's aura changed abruptly. The powerful suction force disappeared without a trace and was replaced by an overwhelming aura. Kacha! The ground under Qin Shi Huang's feet cracked rapidly, and the high steps collapsed bit by bit, as if they couldn't withstand the terrifying force. Tang Zheng watched this scene with his mouth agape. It turned out that the stately painting was far more powerful than he had imagined. Cui San had only scratched the surface. In the hands of the Empyrean fairy, the original owner, the stately painting could unleash its true power. The ground collapsed rapidly, and the rumbling sound was endless. Tang Zheng helped the unconscious Professor Qi up, but he didn't wake him up immediately because he would definitely faint from the scene. He hurriedly retreated to the side to avoid the power that seemed to be able to destroy the heavens and earth. Boom! Finally, the high steps were crushed to pieces. Even the first emperor of Qin's figure disappeared. Was he dead? This thought popped up in Tang Zheng's mind, but when he saw the Empyrean fairy's serious expression, he immediately understood that he was too naive. Who was the first emperor of Qin? How could the emperor of Qin die so easily? Bang! A loud sound confirmed Tang Zheng's guess. The first emperor of Qin rose from the ruins and went against the flow, resisting the terrifying pressure. His huge fist directly attacked the stately painting. Boom! A powerful shock wave spread in all directions, and only the rumbling sound of collapse could be heard. The celestial palace had actually collapsed, and countless rocks fell from the sky as if it was raining. Tang Zheng knew that things were not good, and quickly protected Professor Qi from the falling rocks. So what if you have the 5-mountain suppression? I'll still destroy you. The first emperor of Qin seemed to be in a sorry state, and there were a few large holes in his robe. The stately painting was attacked, and its light immediately dimmed. Seeing this, the Empyrean fairy's expression didn't change. She said, "Do you really think the stately painting is only this powerful?" 5 elements: wind and thunder. Crack! A thunderous explosion resounded through the celestial palace, and a bolt of lightning flew out from the stately painting, directly striking the first emperor of Qin's body. Boom! The first emperor of Qin landed on the ground again, and his body was charred black. Even the top of his head was emitting black smoke, and he looked even more miserable. Whoosh! A strong wind blew, and the sand was blinding. The flying sand and rocks seemed to have transformed into a tornado that swept towards the first emperor of Qin. In an instant, the first emperor of Qin's figure disappeared in the tornado, and only the sound of hitting could be heard. Suddenly, another thunderous explosion sounded, and a silver-white bolt of lightning fell into the tornado, mixing with the flying sand and rocks, and its power increased greatly. Time passed bit by bit, and the sound of hitting gradually stopped. Finally, everything returned to calm, and the tornado and lightning disappeared without a trace. The first emperor of Qin lay on the ground, and wisps of black smoke rose from his body. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. The Empyrean fairy's face became a little pale. She was already injured, and using these great divine powers consumed a lot of her power. She was already feeling that she couldn't hold on anymore. She stared at the first emperor of Qin without blinking, as if confirming whether he was really dead or not. If he wasn't dead, what should she do? She already didn't have any extra power to continue. Tang Zheng was also looking at the first emperor of Qin. Of course, he didn't ignore the Empyrean fairy. Looking at her expression, his heart thumped, and he already knew that the situation was very serious. Bah! A soft sound rang out, and then they saw the first emperor of Qin slowly get up. He spat out a mouthful of bloody saliva, and his face was covered in dust. He didn't have any of the awe-inspiring might of an ancient emperor. However, the anger in his eyes made the two of them feel deeply uneasy. Not only was he not dead, but his anger was even more intense, and it was as if he was about to burn. You have finally completely stimulated my killing intent. Empyrean fairy, for the rest of your life, you can be my slave and cheat. Don't ever think of raising your proud head again. As for you, we are both Skywalkers, but there can only be one Skywalker in this world, so you must die. After saying that, he didn't give the two of them any time to react and had already disappeared on the spot. Then, he stood in front of Tang Zheng. Monarch Fist. The huge fist hit Tang Zheng's forehead without any fancy moves. Peng, he flew out, and was thrown far away into the ruins without any sound. The first emperor of Qin didn't pay attention to Tang Zheng anymore, because he believed that his fist would definitely shatter his opponent's head. He couldn't be more dead. You. This time, the Empyrean fairy didn't have time to help. She looked on helplessly as Tang Zheng was hit in the head. She was both angry and unwilling. This eyesore is dead, then you are mine. Today, I will take you here, and absorb all the pure yin energy in your body. The first emperor of Qin said aggressively. A trace of redness and anger finally flashed across the Empyrean fairy's face, and she said, despicable and shameless. She had a deep feeling of powerlessness. A few thousand years ago, she protected her body and didn't let the first emperor of Qin have his way. Could it be that today, she couldn't escape from the devil's claws in the end? Was this her fate? No. She definitely wouldn't easily accept her fate. She recalled the stately painting and faced the first emperor of Qin, saying, I won't let you have your way, even if I die. In front of me, you won't have the chance to die even if you want to. The first emperor of Qin said domineeringly, and his large hand reached out to grab the Empyrean fairy's neck. The Empyrean fairy hurriedly dodged, leaving a long mark on the ground. However, the first emperor of Qin's speed was faster than her, and he followed her like a shadow, forcing her into a dead end in an instant. She gathered all the energy in her body and once again activated the stately painting, and a huge suction force was produced again. This move again, do you think it will succeed? The first emperor of Qin was already prepared, and he moved like lightning. Before that suction force could envelop him, the stately painting changed hands and fell into his hands. The Empyrean fairy's eyes dimmed, and she stared blankly at her empty hands. If I hadn't spoiled you and taken care of your feelings back then, why would I wait until today? This time, I won't be soft-hearted anymore. You women are often cheap, and the only way is to make you submit wholeheartedly, the first emperor of Qin said domineeringly. Don't even think about it. Although she didn't have any Dharma treasures, the Empyrean fairy still didn't give up without a fight. She pushed her palms forward, and a surging power surged toward the first emperor of Qin. The first emperor of Qin laughed mockingly, an arrow at the end of its flight, pointless resistance. Bang! After breaking the Empyrean fairy's attack with one move, the Empyrean fairy staggered back, but she crashed into the wall and had nowhere to retreat. The first emperor of Qin moved forward and blocked the Empyrean fairy's path of retreat. He laughed maniacally, submit to me, or else, the one who will suffer will be you. Pooh! The Empyrean fairy raised her head high and spat a mouthful of saliva on the first emperor of Qin's face. That dust-covered face and the saliva looked comical and laughable. The awe-inspiring aura of an ancient emperor was completely gone. The first emperor of Qin's eyes widened, and he grabbed the Empyrean fairy with his large hand, firmly imprisoning her so that she couldn't move. Chapter 738. The Empyrean fairy was in despair. After thousands of years, she still couldn't escape from Qin Shi Huang's evil claws. She couldn't live, but she couldn't die. Qin Shi Huang's hand was about to touch the Empyrean fairy's clothes when suddenly, a dragon's roar resounded through the sky. The heaven and earth shook as if the earth was shaking. What happened? Qin Shi Huang and the Empyrean fairy were both shocked and looked towards the direction of the dragon's roar. A golden light soared into the sky and turned into a golden dragon. It soared into the sky as if it was going to soar into the clouds. This. Qin Shi Huang was dumbfounded. He was really shocked by this scene and didn't understand what was going on. Suddenly, his pupils shrank as he saw a blurry face in the golden light. It was Tang Zheng. This brat didn't die. Qin Shi Huang couldn't believe it. Impossible. My fist hit his head. Even if it was made of steel, it would be smashed into pieces. How did he survive? Seeing this, the Empyrean fairy's cold eyes lit up. She mocked, Zheng, you claim to be the #1 in the world, but your opponent is also a celestial. Do you think he can be killed so easily? Qin Shi Huang glared at her fiercely and retracted his hand. I will take care of him first, then I will take care of you. His finger touched her body, and she couldn't move. She could only watch as Qin Shi Huang rushed towards Tang Zheng. Tang Zhang's eyes shone with golden light as he floated in the air. His consciousness was very clear. Just now, that punch almost took his life, but at the crucial moment, the dragon mark on his forehead was activated. That three-clawed golden dragon actually rushed out from his forehead and blocked most of Qin Shi Huang's attack, saving his life. The appearance of the three-clawed golden dragon surprised Tang Zhang. He and the golden dragon seemed to have merged into one, becoming one. Suddenly, he felt that the bottom of his feet was light as he involuntarily rose into the air. A gust of air rushed out from his throat. He looked up to the sky and roared. The dragon's roar shook the surroundings. He was dumbstruck. He could actually let out a dragon's roar. Before he could figure out the reason behind it, he felt a surge of energy rushing into his body from the heavens and the earth, instantly flowing through his 8 extraordinary meridians. This is dragon energy. Tang Zhang was shocked. He was not unfamiliar with this golden energy. Back then, he had absorbed the dragon chi of the 5-clawed golden dragon. Generations of emperors also wanted to absorb the dragon chi to consolidate their dragon might. But why would there be dragon chi in this tomb? Tang Zhang did not see a dragon. Could it be Qin Shi Huang? Impossible. As an emperor, even though Qin Shi Huang's dragon might was very strong, Tang Zhang did not feel any dragon chi. He looked around, but it was empty. The huge celestial palace was extremely dark, and there was not a single dragon in sight. The ground was still trembling, and the rocks on the ground floated up bit by bit. The first emperor of Qin transformed into an afterimage and passed through the floating rocks, arriving in front of Tang Zhang. Looking at Tang Zhang at such a close distance, he once again felt a deep shock. As an emperor of Qin Shi Huang, he understood the use of dragons too well. Emperors were seen as the incarnation of true dragons, but in fact, that was all self-deception, or to deceive the people of the world. How could they be the incarnation of true dragons? They were just mortal bodies. But the emperors of each dynasty had never given up on the extravagant hope of transforming into dragons, and Qin Shi Huang was no exception. Other than seeking immortality, he also searched everywhere for traces of true dragons. However, the whereabouts of dragons were mysterious, and there was no place to find them. But he was the ruler of a country after all. With a single order, thousands of people rushed about, and finally, they found a dragon vein in the Qinling Mountains. The dragon vein was hidden in the mountains. It was said that the undulating Qinling Mountains was transformed from a true dragon that had died in battle, and the dragon vein of the true dragon was also hidden in this undulating mountain range. Qin Shi Huang was overjoyed, and sent a large number of people to dig up the mountains and stones in an attempt to dig out the dragon vein. Qin Shi Huang believed that as long as he had this dragon vein, it would not be an extravagant hope for him to transform into the true dragon son of heaven. However, things did not go as he wished. Even with the power of the country, he could not find any trace of the dragon vein, but he firmly believed that the dragon vein was hidden in the Qinling Mountains. There was no doubt about it. He was not willing to admit defeat like this, so he built his own tomb at the location of the dragon vein's head, trying to sleep with the dragon vein, or maybe he could absorb the dragon vein after he died. All of these were extravagant hopes. In these thousands of years, the dragon vein did not appear, which made him almost despair. He even doubted whether his previous judgment was correct. Was there really a dragon vein hidden in the Qinling Mountains? But looking at the living golden dragon in front of him, he was extremely shocked. He had been searching for a dragon his whole life, but he did not see it until he died. This brat's cultivation was so weak, how could he merge with the dragon? They were all Skywalkers, but why was the gap between them so big? He was not willing to accept it, but he was not afraid. Instead, he was faintly excited. Since the dragon had appeared, then he could replace it. Then wouldn't he be able to transform into a dragon? Once this thought appeared, it crazily occupied every one of his brain cells. His eyes became excited. This method was definitely feasible. The heavens are helping me, allowing me to obtain such a big gift that I have always dreamed of when I was revived. Qin Shi Huang laughed wildly. He took a step forward, and the soles of his feet landed on the void. He walked toward Tang Zheng as if he was walking on flat ground. The Empyrean fairy's heart skipped a beat, and she turned pale with fright. She guessed Qin Shi Huang's intention and warned, "Be careful." Tang Zheng stared blankly as Qin Shi Huang walked over. He raised both of his hands and pointed his 5 fingers upwards. The dragon qi between heaven and earth madly surged into his palms. Whoosh! Whoosh! The golden light on his body surged, and in an instant, the golden dragon became 10 meters long, full of dragon might. Tang Zheng was inside the dragon monk. His eyes were the golden dragon's eyes, his hands were the golden dragon's dragon claws, and his legs were the golden dragon's dragon tail. Qin Shi Huang was overjoyed. He clicked his tongue and praised, "It's indeed magical. Now that I've replaced you, your mission will end here." Qin Shi Huang's attention was completely focused on Tang Zheng. He did not notice that the dragon aura in the air was getting thicker and thicker, and it was completely gathering on Tang Zheng's body. Traces of golden light seeped out from the ground, and the ground shook more and more violently. It was as if thousands of arrows had been shot into the sky. When the Empyrean fairy saw the golden light on the ground, her expression changed slightly. She muttered to herself, "The dragon vein. So the dragon vein really exists. He is actually absorbing it." Yes. Tang Zheng was absorbing the dragon vein. The 3-clawed golden dragon had revealed its true form and triggered the dragon vein hidden in the Qinling Mountains. As a result, the intense dragon aura broke through the restraints of the ground and was attracted by Tang Zheng. Moreover, that was not all. The golden light was the real dragon vein. When it completely broke out of the ground, the energy was the most terrifying. It was not something the current dragon aura could compare to. Qin Shi Huang did not notice this. He only had eyes for Tang Zheng. Finally, he could not hold it in anymore. He roared, "Monarch Fist," and attacked Tang Zheng with his iron fist. Who? With a thought, Tang Zheng swept out his dragon tail, bringing along a violent wind, and ruthlessly lashed at Qin Shi Huang's fist. Qin Shi Huang retreated a few steps, but rushed forward as if he was flying. He grabbed the dragon tail and laughed sinisterly, "True dragon, haha, I am the true son of heaven. This is all mine." After saying that, a black light flashed in his palm. The black light quickly spread and wrapped around the dragon tail. Hiss! Wisps of dragon aura surged and were absorbed into Qin Shi Huang's palm. Then, his body was slowly covered by the golden light. This is the true dragon. I am finally going to get what I want. Qin Shi Huang's long hair fluttered in the wind, and his face was filled with madness. Tang Zheng was shocked. He realized that the dragon aura in his body was flowing out bit by bit into Qin Shi Huang's body. No, I can't let him have his way. Tang Zheng quickly circulated the dragon god art. In an instant, the dragon aura in the world surged into his body. Pooh! The golden light on the ground soared into the sky. A golden dragon vein broke out of the ground and flew straight to Tang Zheng. Qin Shi Huang also finally discovered this golden light and shouted in joy, "Dragon vein! So there really is a dragon vein. The heavens are helping me. With his dragon body and the dragon vein, I can transform into a dragon. Perfect." Tang Zheng had also heard of the legend of the Qinling Mountains being a dragon vein, but he did not expect to see one. Moreover, the dragon vein flew straight to him, wanting to merge with him. He was overjoyed. If he had the dragon vein, his strength would definitely increase greatly. Perhaps he could get out of the predicament in front of him. Roar! A dragon roar burst out of his throat. He grabbed with both hands, and the dragon claws grabbed Qin Shi Huang's shoulders. Whoosh! Qin Shi Huang was thrown out. Tang Zheng took this opportunity to pounce towards the dragon vein that was slowly rising into the air. The dragon vein was a golden light, but he could clearly feel the powerful energy it contained. The dragon tail swung and wrapped around the dragon vein. The dragon vein flashed with golden light and disappeared into the dragon tail in the blink of an eye. The golden dragon instantly turned transparent. He could clearly see the dragon vein spreading from the dragon tail to the dragon head. Wherever it passed, palm-sized scales appeared on the golden dragon's body. They shone with golden light. Soon, the dragon tail was completely covered by the golden scales and quickly spread to the dragon head. Tang Zhang's eyes flickered with golden light. He felt a powerful force flowing from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. There was an inexhaustible strength. Be careful. Suddenly, the Empyrean fairy's voice sounded again. Tang Zhang's heart trembled, but it was too late. Qin Shi Huang silently grabbed the dragon tail again. The black light immediately covered the scales. The dragon vein's rising momentum suddenly stopped. Instead, it slowly swam toward Qin Shi Huang. I have been searching for the dragon vein my entire life. Do you really think it will be so easy for you to absorb it? These are all mine. No one should even think of touching my things. Absorb. Qin Shi Huang let out an earth-shattering roar. The dragon vein was absorbed into his body with a whoosh. In an instant, his entire body was enveloped by golden light, and golden scales appeared on his body. Chapter 739. Tang Zheng watched helplessly as the dragon vein was sucked into Qin Shi Huang's body. His heart was filled with grief. Furthermore, he felt that the dragon qi in his body was still being sucked away. After a while, all the energy in his body would disappear. Qin Shi Huang proudly looked at Tang Zheng and said, "The one who laughs at the end is the winner. The winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. Success will always belong to me." The Empyrean fairy was powerless. Her eyes finally flashed with despair. If Qin Shi Huang transformed into a dragon, then she would not have the slightest bit of resistance. Tang Zheng did not accept his fate. He continued to circulate his energy to resist. The three-clawed golden dragon flew into the sky and crashed into the towering palace, causing rocks to fly everywhere. However, Qin Shi Huang was like a maggot. He could not get rid of it. His hands firmly held onto the dragon's tail. The golden light on his body became brighter and brighter. On the other hand, Tang Zheng's dragon body became dimmer and dimmer. My dragon qi will soon be sucked away by him. Damn it! Tang Zheng hatefully said. He felt that his strength was gradually weakening. Am I going to let him off so easily? When I heard that he fought Yamada no Orochi, I originally thought that he was a peerless hero. Who would have thought that his true face was like this? No, I can't admit defeat like this. Tang Zheng raised his head high and took a deep breath, circulating all of his energy to resist. However, Qin Shi Huang's hands seemed to have some sort of magical power, causing his resistance to be completely useless. Instead, his dragon qi was sucked away like a waterfall. Isn't he also a celestial? Furthermore, he needs to absorb the Empyrean fairy's pure yin energy to offset the pure yang energy in his body. Since he likes to absorb energy, then I will give him the pure yang energy in my body and let him absorb as much as he wants. Tang Zheng thought of a plan and hurriedly circulated his power. The pure yang force in his body was already quite a bit, especially after his power had increased greatly during this period of time. The pure yang force had been on the verge of erupting several times. However, the pure yang energy was an inherent energy in his body. He could not expel it out. However, Qin Shi Huang's ability to absorb energy was so powerful. Perhaps he could really absorb the pure yang energy as well. Traces of pure yang energy fused with the dragon qi and flowed from his 8 extraordinary meridians to Qin Shi Huang. Qin Shi Huang was oblivious as he continued to crazily absorb the dragon aura. His body was already covered by a layer of golden scales as the golden light gradually transformed into a dragon's body. Tang Zheng's dragon body had already shrunk countless times, and it was still shrinking. He felt that he was about to be sucked dry, and there wasn't much pure yang energy left. Finally, Tang Zheng's dragon body collapsed and the golden light disappeared. He fell from the sky and crashed heavily onto the ground. Qin Shi Huang did not give chase. Instead, he raised his hands and looked at the dragon claws that were gradually growing. He laughed wildly in excitement. His laughter shook the surrounding rocks and caused them to fall down. "Son of Heaven, I am the true Son of Heaven," Qin Shi Huang said proudly. He looked down at Tang Zheng and Empyrean Fairy. "Kid, you have fulfilled my wish. I will leave you with an intact corpse. As for you, Empyrean Fairy, don't worry. I won't kill you. You are now even less my match. Therefore, I will keep you alive and let you watch me unify the world again. I will be the greatest emperor since ancient times." Empyrean Fairy didn't say a word, but the hatred in her eyes had already explained everything. Tang Zheng got up from the ground and looked at Qin Shi Huang indignantly. He had tried every means to save himself, but he ultimately failed. Qin Shi Huang flew in front of Tang Zheng and gathered his dragon claws into a fist. He punched down and the ground immediately caved in. Tang Zheng stood in the middle of the pit and struggled to resist the terrifying power above his head. Now, not only had he lost his dragon aura, but a lot of his true qi and pure yang energy had also been absorbed. Therefore, even an ordinary warrior would find it difficult to resist, let alone a super expert like Qin Shi Huang. "Let's see how you escape from death this time," Qin Shi Huang said hatefully. Clearly, he was still brooding over his failure to kill Tang Zheng. At this moment, Tang Zheng was absolutely powerless to fight back. As long as he was hit, he would die without a doubt. The three of them were very clear about this point and had completely different reactions. Tang Zheng raised his head like a heroic warrior. Empyrean Fairy's eyes flashed with sorrow. Qin Shi Huang, who had the true dragon golden body, would be difficult to find a match. It was unknown how many bloody storms would be stirred up and how many people would die at his hands. Suddenly, under everyone's gaze, the attack of the dragon claws came to a halt. Qin Shi Huang's entire body trembled. The scales on his body flickered and then shattered bit by bit. "What's going on?" Tang Zheng and Empyrean Fairy turned pale with fright. Qin Shi Huang's strength had already reached the peak. No matter how they looked at it, his current situation was not optimistic. "Ah!" A miserable scream came out of Qin Shi Huang's mouth, scaring everyone. How could this be? How could this be? How could the pure yang energy erupt? Qin Shi Huang roared hysterically. Tang Zheng was stunned for a moment and then became ecstatic. He originally thought that his plan had failed and that the pure yang energy that was sucked away was unable to do anything to Qin Shi Huang. He never thought that it was because the pure yang energy had yet to erupt. Qin Shi Huang's strength was profound, so naturally, the pure yang energy in his body was also very powerful. Furthermore, it was pure yang energy that had been accumulated for thousands of years. It was easy to imagine how terrifying the amount was. Tang Zheng's pure yang energy was like a drop of water that dripped into his body. The pure yang energy in his body was already about to overflow. With the injection of this drop of pure yang energy, it immediately caused the pure yang energy to completely erupt. Tang Zheng clearly remembered the scene that Tian Chanzi had described to him. A person with the 9 yang saint body would explode and die after the pure yang energy completely erupted. At this moment, witnessing this scene with his own eyes, the shock it caused to him was imaginable. Qin Shi Huang stared at Tang Zheng condescendingly and roared fiercely, "Brat, it was you who did this. You gave me the pure yang energy in your body." The corner of Tang Zheng's mouth squeezed out a smile, and said, "Didn't you want my dragon qi, my power? I'll give them all to you, all to you. How does it feel?" "No." Qin Shi Huang roared at the top of his lungs. With the sound of the red dragon's explosion, the true dragon's body completely exploded, turning into specks of golden light that floated in the air. The true dragon's golden body had been destroyed. "I won't let you succeed, I won't." Qin Shi Huang hurriedly circulated his energy, wanting to resist the pure yang energy. However, the pure yang energy had already completely exploded, so all of his efforts were in vain. He watched helplessly as the pure yang energy in his veins seemed to turn into flames, burning every cell in his body bit by bit. Pure yin energy, yin and yang balance. Qin Shi Huang muttered as his eyes immediately locked onto the Empyrean fairy. Like a drowning person grabbing onto a life-saving straw, he muttered, yin and yang balance, yin and yang balance. He crazily rushed towards the Empyrean fairy. No. Tang Zheng immediately saw through Qin Shi Huang's intentions. He wanted to possess the Empyrean fairy and use the pure yin energy in her body to balance yin and yang, thus resolving the danger of self-destruction. If Qin Shi Huang succeeded, then all of Tang Zheng's efforts would be in vain. He really would not have any chance of survival. However, his voice was of no use, and he could only watch as everything unfolded before him. The Empyrean fairy was imprisoned and could not move. Seeing Qin Shi Huang about to violate her but unable to do anything, a trace of sadness flashed across her heart. Qin Shi Huang rushed in front of the Empyrean fairy and stretched out his demonic claws. Just as he was about to make the next move, a bloody light suddenly broke through his body. Blood splattered everywhere, filling the sky. Ah, no, why? I was so close to succeeding. Qin Shi Huang roared unwillingly. However, streaks of bloody light rushed out from his body. Not long later, his body was full of holes. Blood flowed out from his 7 orifices, and his prestige was completely gone. When Tang Zheng and the Empyrean fairy saw this scene, they were overjoyed, and their eyes lit up. Tang Zheng could not help but shout, "Success, he finally succeeded." The Empyrean fairy said coldly, "Yingzheng, you should have died thousands of years ago. This is your destiny. Do you really think you can escape the arrangement of the heavenly Tao? Your time of death has come. I am the Emperor of all ages, I am not willing, I cannot die like this. I am the true dragon son of heaven, I have the true dragon golden body." Qin Shi Huang chattered incessantly as he lost his head out of fear. Suddenly, his voice came to an abrupt stop. Then, with a boom that was even more deafening than thunder, Qin Shi Huang's body completely exploded, turning into a mass of bloody light that scattered in all directions. The huge shockwave caused the heavenly palace to shake more and more violently. Rocks flew everywhere, and the rumbling was incessant. Qin Shi Huang was dead. He exploded and died. Tang Zheng stared blankly at this scene. Other than rejoicing, fear also followed like a shadow. Because, he was also in danger of exploding and dying. I don't want to become that mass of bloody light. Tang Zheng hurriedly shook his head and chased this terrifying thought out of his mind. He gradually solidified a belief in his heart: in the future, he must absorb more pure yin energy and harmonize yin and yang. He must not follow in the footsteps of Qin Shi Huang. A strand of golden light slowly rose from the mass of bloody light, attracting Tang Zheng's attention. Dragon Vein. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. Although Qin Shi Huang was dead, the dragon vein was not destroyed. He hurriedly dragged his leaden legs and rushed over, grabbing the dragon vein. The dragon vein drilled into his palm like a small snake, wriggling forward. Not long after, it slithered to the 9 main meridians and continuously circled around a meridian. Skywalkers had 9 main meridians, one more than normal people had 8 main meridians. At this moment, the dragon vein was circling around the extra main meridian. That main meridian was gradually dyed gold. Finally, it merged with the dragon vein, becoming one. Immediately, Tang Zheng's 9th main meridian became the dragon vein. Whoosh whoosh. Chapter 740. Tang Zheng felt like he was a lake that was about to dry up. Suddenly, a flood gushed in, nourishing every inch of his skin and every cell. He could not help but moan in comfort. However, the flood was pure energy that flowed through his 8 extraordinary meridians, making him feel like the energy was about to burst out of his body. However, this was not the effect of the pure yang energy. He had only absorbed the purest dragon qi, not the pure yang energy. The pure yang energy had disappeared the moment Emperor Qin self-destructed. After the golden dragon qi entered his body, it split into two. One went straight to his dantian, while the other stayed in his glabella. In an instant, he was completely enveloped by the golden light. The three-clawed golden dragon and the dragon seal shook its head and wagged its tail. It kept absorbing the dragon qi, and the golden light on its body became more and more intense. However, one could clearly see that there was still a golden trace on the dragon, as if a tendon ran through its entire body. The dragon vein. Tang Zheng immediately recognized it. The dragon vein had merged with his 9th major meridian. He did not expect it to appear on the three-clawed golden dragon. He had a feeling that the three-clawed golden dragon had always been one with him. At the same time, more and more dragon qi gathered in his dantian, circling in his dantian. The dragon qi was changing, becoming denser and denser. Tang Zheng suddenly had a feeling that his Jindan was about to reach the large success stage. The Empyrean fairy also saw this and reminded loudly, condensing the golden core is a very critical moment. Do your best and don't be careless. Sit down cross-legged. Tang Zheng sat down as instructed. The dragon qi between heaven and earth rushed into his body at an even faster speed. This was the first time in his life that Tang Zheng condensed the golden core. He had no experience at all. He could only rely on his imagination. However, the reality was always several times more difficult than he imagined. The dragon qi was still circling, but it did not start condensing the golden core. Time passed by. Tang Zheng wanted to do it, but he was powerless. He could not help but feel impatient and flustered. Suddenly, the Empyrean fairy's voice rang in his ears. Focus your mind and calm your breath. I will teach you the core condensation method. This is a miraculous method to condense the golden core. You have absorbed so much dragon qi. With the help of the core condensation method, the quality of the golden core you condense will be greatly improved. Tang Zheng was overjoyed and said, Thank you, Empyrean fairy. A simple and not complicated text was whispered into Tang Zheng's ears. Tang Zheng was quick-witted and had a good comprehension ability. He instantly understood the trick and channeled the dragon qi bit by bit. Whoosh! The dragon energy quickly gathered and gradually turned from a gaseous state to a liquid state. Moreover, the golden luster became even more dazzling. Tang Zheng could clearly see that at the very center, a small dot was beginning to condense from a liquid state into a solid state. It was like a seed, and as the seed grew bigger, more and more dragon qi gathered. His dantian turned into a golden light and penetrated through his dantian. Inch by inch, his skin and bones came out from the surface of his skin. Seeing this, the Empyrean fairy muttered to herself, Skywalkers are indeed blessed by the heavens. Condensing the golden core is the most important step, and he actually used dragon qi. The quality of this dragon qi is much higher than a normal golden core. It will be very beneficial for his future cultivation. Other people spend 10% of their energy to cultivate, but he only needs 5%. She seemed to be envious of Tang Zheng's good fortune. Tang Zheng did not know this. He was trying his best to condense the golden core. He watched as the golden core slowly grew from nothing to bigger. It was like the golden core was his child. This feeling was very strange. The dragon qi in the sky was completely absorbed into his body. The golden core also stopped spinning. There was no more dragon qi in his dantian. Only the golden core was left floating quietly in his dantian. Tang Zheng moved his mind. A surge of true qi was released from the golden core and flowed to all of his meridians. This surge of true qi was much purer than before, and the energy it contained was even more terrifying. Is this the golden core realm? Tang Zheng was very happy. He opened his eyes and looked at his hands. They were filled with endless power. The true qi that was originally stored in the 9 main meridians was of course gone. It was all integrated into the golden core. From this moment on, the golden core was his source of power. If his gold core was depleted, then his power would be completely gone. Tang Zheng understood this, so he secretly swore to protect the golden core. It was his lifeblood. Rumble. The heavenly palace shook more and more violently. Just now, he was immersed in his cultivation and did not notice the dangerous environment outside. The impact of Qin Shi Huang's self-destruction made the heavenly palace on the verge of collapse. I can't stay here for long. Tang Zheng rushed in front of the Empyrean fairy. Looking at her motionless body, he asked, I'll undo your restriction. His fingers quickly touched her body. The elasticity of her skin was clearly transmitted through his fingers, causing his heart to skip a beat. The Empyrean fairy felt a strange feeling in her heart, but her face was as cold as ice. After regaining her freedom, she impatiently urged, the heavenly palace is about to collapse. Let's leave here immediately. Yes. Tang Zheng picked up the unconscious Professor Qi on the ground and rushed out of the heavenly palace with the Empyrean fairy behind him. Rumble. With a loud sound, the heavenly palace collapsed and turned into dust. It was a ruin. Tang Zheng looked at the scene in a daze and sighed. Qin Shi Huang did everything he could, but in the end, he ended up like this. This is his fate. He should have died a few thousand years ago, but he used some kind of secret method to luckily survive and even come back to life. However, he still can't escape the eyes of the heavenly Tao. The Empyrean fairy said coldly. The heavenly palace was so tall that it reached the clouds. It's a pity that it was destroyed. Tang Zheng smiled bitterly and sighed. So tall that it reached the clouds? The Empyrean fairy snorted and hit the nail on the head. Those are all illusions. Do you really think this mausoleum is real? It's not real? Tang Zheng was shocked. He had never doubted the authenticity of this mausoleum. Look at the stars in the sky. Why are there stars in the mausoleum? Tang Zheng was speechless. He couldn't answer. Those are all illusions. The Empyrean fairy waved her hand. The stars in the sky flashed and disappeared. Ah! Tang Zheng was dumbfounded. The illusions were too realistic, or perhaps they were too high class. Even he was deceived. But this space is so vast that you can't see the end of it. It can't be fake, right? Tang Zheng asked, unwilling to give up. The Empyrean fairy's lips curled into a mysterious smile and said, this is another treasure of Qin Shi Huang, Summer World. Summer World? Tang Zheng was moved. He couldn't help but touch the Summer bag he carried with him. Could it be that the Summer World was the same as the Summer bag? The Empyrean fairy glanced at him and saw through his thoughts. She said, your storage magic weapon is the Summer bag, right? How did you know? I guessed. The Summer World is a higher level storage treasure. It's many levels higher than your Summer bag. The storage space is much larger. Moreover, the Summer bag can only store inanimate objects. The Summer World is different. Even living things can live in it. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. He was dissatisfied with the flaw of the Summer bag. He didn't expect the Summer World to perfectly solve his problem. Then can I take this Summer World away? Tang Zheng asked eagerly. Such a powerful storage treasure couldn't be wasted. Of course you can. But after you take it away, the mausoleum will be destroyed. Tang Zheng nodded. It's good that it's destroyed. If this mausoleum were to be exposed to the outside world, who knows how many waves it would cause? Because the things inside are too mysterious, beyond common sense. If Professor Qi hadn't fainted, he would definitely have sternly objected. But now, he didn't have the right to speak. Since that's the case, then this Summer World is yours. The Empyrean fairy said naturally and generously. Her large hand grabbed at the void. She frowned. There's something else here? Tang Zheng immediately remembered those terracotta figures and hurriedly told her. The Empyrean fairy coldly snorted and said, those are the tricks that Qin Shi Huang liked. Even if he died, he would still forge these things to protect himself. But in the end, everything was wasted. These things are very annoying. I'll help you destroy them all. Wait a moment. Tang Zheng's mind moved. He remembered the bronze masks on the terracotta figures. They contained spiritual energy that could increase one's cultivation. He had just broken through and didn't need it for the time being. But once he stabilized his cultivation, he would need a large amount of spiritual energy to cultivate. He couldn't just waste it. What's wrong? Those terracotta figures are still useful to me. Tang Zheng said somewhat embarrassedly. He was really too greedy. The Empyrean fairy didn't mind and said, then I'll give them to you together with Summer World. Once you have Summer World, those terracotta figures won't be able to harm you. As her voice fell, her slender white hand reached into the sky. A ray of light shot up into the sky as if it wanted to break through the dome of heaven. It rose into the air and exploded with a loud bang. Then, Tang Zheng saw that above his head was a dome of heaven. This summer world really did have a boundary. It was just that it was too dark so he couldn't see it. Space fluctuated rapidly and quickly shrank. Suddenly, Tang Zheng felt his body sway. Everything in front of him disappeared. He was actually in front of the tomb again. The huge space behind him had completely disappeared. It turned out that in this ancient tomb, only the huge tomb door was man-made. The rest of the place was created using Summer World. This kind of divine ability caused Tang Zheng to be unable to calm down for a long time. This was a truly great divine ability. The Empyrean fairy stood in front of him. She handed him a bracelet and said, "This is Summer World." Bracelet? Qin Shi Huang is already dead. His consciousness has already been erased. After you drip a drop of blood essence on it, Summer World will be yours. Tang Zheng hurriedly circulated his energy. A drop of blood essence dripped from his fingertips and entered the bracelet. The bracelet flashed and disappeared. A faint mark appeared on Tang Zheng's wrist. It looked like a bracelet. If one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't be able to see it at all. This was much more powerful than a summer bag. There was no need to worry about losing it. Chapter 741. Tang Zheng turned pale with fright and hurriedly helped the Empyrean fairy up. Seeing her pale face and closed eyes, he shouted, "What happened to you?" The Empyrean fairy did not respond. Could it be that she was seriously injured in the battle? Tang Zheng hurriedly checked her injuries, but when his true qi entered her body, he felt it was repelled by a cold and powerful force. Tang Zheng was helpless. Without a doubt, the Empyrean fairy's cultivation was much higher than his. His true qi was treated as an external threat and was directly blocked outside of her body. He changed to the ordinary method of diagnosis, taking her pulse. Her pulse was stable and there was nothing wrong. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. He thought that the battle just now must have consumed too much of her energy, so she fainted for a while. Since there was no major problem, he was relieved. It's not good to stay here for long. Let's leave first. Tang Zheng looked at Professor Qi and then looked at the Empyrean fairy. It was not easy to support the two of them through the narrow mountain path. Thus, he simply put the two of them into Summer Heavens. Summer Heavens. Tang Zheng's consciousness extended inside. Immediately, he knew the situation inside like the back of his hand. There were tens of thousands of terracotta figures, standing in front of the altar like old monks in meditation. The ruins of the heavenly palace were very eye-catching. Tang Zheng directly cleared out the ruins and piled them up in the mausoleum. Then, he glanced at the huge mausoleum door and left without looking back. Seeing the sun again, the sun shone down and his mood was particularly good. Although this time he did not discover the secret of the celestial, he still saw the legendary Qin Shi Huang. Although it was very different, he still gained a lot. His cultivation had already broken through to the first stage of the golden core. Although he could not determine the quality of his golden core, the quality of the golden core that was condensed from the dragon Qi would not be too bad. Looking at the shining golden core, he was particularly happy. He turned his head to look at the mountain peak. With a slash of the war soul sword, the entrance collapsed with a loud bang, turning into pieces of rubble that were sealed shut. Now, no one will be able to find out. Tang Zheng did not look back as he quickly disappeared into the forest. In the evening, he arrived at the entrance of the village outside the mountain and got Professor Qi and the Empyrean fairy out of Sumer world. The Empyrean fairy slowly woke up and looked up at the sky. Her eyes were filled with joy as she muttered to herself, "I'm back in this world again." "Are you okay?" Tang Zheng asked. The Empyrean fairy took a deep breath and said, "I'm fine. I just used up too much energy and fainted for a moment." "That's good." Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief and pointed to the village not far away. "Let's stay here tonight and go to the city tomorrow." The Empyrean fairy looked up and saw a modern building that was completely different from the village she remembered. She frowned slightly and said, "So many things have changed in the past few thousand years." Tang Zheng nodded. "It's much bigger than you think. If you don't mind, you can stay with me first. With a companion, we can take care of each other. You can also adapt to modern life." Although the Empyrean fairy was powerful, she might not be able to adapt to modern life. She might cause a big disturbance or even attract the attention of the country and become a public enemy. He did not want to see that scene. The Empyrean fairy stared at Tang Zheng for a long time without saying anything. Even though her eyes were calm, the pressure it gave off was not small. Fortunately, Tang Zheng's heart was calm and did not have any distracting thoughts, so he was not afraid. "Okay, thank you." The Empyrean fairy agreed. She paused for a moment and said, "Although you and Qin Shi Huang are both Skywalkers, your personalities are completely different." "Of course not. I'm not as cruel as him." Tang Zheng nodded. "That's good. I'll give you a piece of advice. Even if you're strong, you can't kill too many people. Otherwise, you will definitely suffer a backlash in the future. Qin Shi Huang is a good example." The Empyrean fairy warned. Tang Zheng's face turned cold. He said solemnly, "I'm not a homicidal maniac, and I don't have the hobby of killing people. Unless it's an enemy, I won't kill easily." "That's good." "Ah. Where is this place?" Professor Qi suddenly screamed and climbed up from the ground in a panic. He looked around and asked, "Where is Qin Shi Huang? Where is he?" Obviously, he could not forget about Qin Shi Huang. Tang Zheng did not know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "He's dead. You won't be able to see him." "Dead?" Professor Qi exclaimed. "How could he die? Didn't he come back to life? If he didn't die, we would all die." "Professor Qi, you don't want to die, right?" "This. Of course, who wants to die?" Professor Qi said resentfully. Suddenly, his gaze turned and looked at the empty surroundings. "We left the ancient tomb. Of course, we escaped. No, we have to go back. That was a huge discovery in the archaeological world. It will have great research value in perfecting the history of Huaxia." Professor Qi turned around and wanted to leave. Tang Zheng hurriedly pulled him back and advised, "Professor Qi, the entrance has already collapsed. As for the tomb, there's nothing left in it. There's nothing to study. If it collapsed, just dig it out." "How could there be nothing to study?" Professor Qi said stubbornly. Seeing him so stubborn, Tang Zheng could only increase his tone. He said, "Professor Qi, you've seen what you saw and heard in the ancient tomb. Is that an ordinary ancient tomb? If you let everything be exposed, what kind of commotion will it cause? Is this kind of commotion really good?" "This." Professor Qi hesitated. After experiencing the 100,000 mountains, he already understood that there were many mysteries in the long river of Huaxia's history. Perhaps it was not a bad thing that some secrets continued to be lost in history. Qin Shi Huang is still the face of history. As for what his true face is, other people don't care. We also don't need to overturn everyone's understanding. Just treat this trip as a dream and forget it. Tang Zheng said earnestly. Professor Qi looked at Tang Zheng with a burning gaze. Seeing the dignified expression between his brows, he gradually compromised. He had lived for most of his life and knew what was more important. His research was too insignificant compared to some things. Moreover, with Tang Zheng's identity, his words must have been carefully considered. There were many problems that he had not even considered. In addition, Tang Zheng would definitely not harm him. This was definitely the most beneficial solution for him. All right, I promise you. Professor Qi took a deep breath. Although he was unwilling, he could only give up. However, when he turned his gaze, he saw the aloof Empyrean fairy. Even though he had lived for most of his life and seen countless people, when he saw the Empyrean fairy, he could not help but be shocked. He cried out in surprise, "Who is she?" Professor Qi had seen beautiful women before, but those beauties were vulgar compared to the Empyrean fairy. Whether it was beauty or temperament, none of them could compare to her. Fairy, a fairy above the 9 heavens. Professor Qi's eyes were lifeless as he muttered to himself. There are beauties in the north, peerless and independent. A glance could topple a city, a second glance could topple a country. Would you rather not topple a city or a country? A beauty is hard to come by. Tang Zheng was shocked. He did not expect the Empyrean fairy to have such great charm. Although he also felt that the Empyrean fairy's beauty was unparalleled, it was not so exaggerated. He did not know just how shocking the Empyrean fairy's temperament was to ordinary people. Furthermore, he was a celestial with the 9 yang saint body. His resistance to the Empyrean fairy was naturally extraordinary. It was not something an ordinary person could compare to. The Empyrean fairy seemed to have already gotten used to this kind of reaction. She was not surprised at all. She indifferently glanced at Professor Qi and then stared at the village not far away. It was clear that the modern village was quite attractive to her. Tang Zheng hurriedly pulled Professor Qi out of his shock and said, "Professor Qi, he is my first friend. He will be traveling with us for the time being." Friend? Why wasn't she here before? She came to the Qinling Mountains to travel and coincidentally bumped into her. So we traveled together. Tang Zheng lied without thinking. "Oh, may I ask for this young lady's name?" Professor Qi said in a genteel manner. Tang Zheng was momentarily speechless. He also did not know what the Empyrean fairy's name was. He could not possibly introduce her as the Empyrean fairy. Then wouldn't his lie be exposed? The Empyrean fairy did not turn her head and said, "Fu Yao." Fu Yao? Professor Qi smacked his lips. The surname Fu is an ancient surname. There are not many of them in the modern era. The Empyrean fairy turned a deaf ear. Tang Zheng secretly remembered this name. He quickly changed the topic and said, "Professor Qi, everyone is tired. Let's find a hotel to rest first." "Oh, okay. There are girls here so we can't rush around too much," Professor Qi said in a gentlemanly manner. Tang Zheng was surprised. The Empyrean fairy actually had such a charm that even Professor Qi, who did not care about women, cared so much. Who could resist this charm? Then, he finally understood what the charm of a country was. When the 3 of them stepped into the village, everyone's eyes were attracted to the Empyrean fairy. She was the center of attention in the crowd. No one could compete with her. Most importantly, she not only attracted men, but also men, women, old and young. This, her charm made Tang Zheng feel ashamed of his inferiority. The owner of the hotel almost did not charge the 3 of them for their stay. Fortunately, the burly lady boss came to her senses in time and did not go bankrupt. Tang Zheng felt that if this continued, no matter where he went, he would not be at peace. He had to find an opportunity to discuss this problem with the Empyrean fairy. Because of his identity, Tang Zheng never wanted to be the center of attention. That night, after washing up, Professor Qi was exhausted and had already gone to bed early. Tang Zheng tossed and turned, unable to sleep. In the end, He still knocked on the door of the Empyrean fairy's room. Fuyao was sitting upright on the chair watching television. It was as if the little people on the television had a huge charm to her. This was something that Tang Zheng had already seen before. She was full of curiosity towards modern equipment like a curious baby. However, she was very cold. Even if she was curious, she would never ask about it. Instead, she would do her own research. She was the one who unknowingly turned on the television. Chapter 742. Seeing Tang Zheng standing at the door in a daze, the Empyrean fairy finally glanced at him and asked, "What's the matter?" "I want to talk to you about the current world." Tang Zheng walked over and pulled a chair to sit down. "You also realize that this world is very different from your original world, right?" The Empyrean fairy nodded lightly. "It's indeed different, very different. That's why I need to explain the rules of this world to you," Tang Zheng said earnestly. "Rules?" The Empyrean fairy frowned slightly. "Yes, your world has been more than 2,000 years ago. In these 2,000 years, humans have experienced many things. Ordinary people in this world don't know about the existence of cultivators anymore. Moreover, the government, which is the imperial court of your time, is also very different. There are many different rules and restrictions." Seeing that the Empyrean fairy didn't react and was instead interested, Tang Zheng took a deep breath and narrated the history of Hua Xia for the past 2,000 years. The Empyrean fairy's eyes were sometimes gloomy and sometimes surprised. Especially when she heard that the cultivators were expelled, Tang Zheng even felt a trace of anger. He sighed in his heart. It seemed that the ancient cultivators couldn't let go of this matter. The Empyrean fairy was like this, and so was Tian Chanzi. "You said that this society is a society of technology. Even cultivators can't fight against the power of technology?" After Tang Zheng finished speaking, the Empyrean fairy asked like a curious child. "Yes, the power of technology is very powerful and very terrifying. Moreover, the government is not happy to see the appearance of powerful cultivators. This could be a threat to their political situation," Tang Zheng said earnestly, afraid that the Empyrean fairy would be unhappy and turn this world upside down. In fact, he was very curious about the cultivation of the Empyrean fairy. Compared to the 100 Faces Star Sovereign, who was stronger and who was weaker? However, in the end, he resisted the urge to ask. Although there are various restrictions, it is still much better than when Qin Shi Huang was on the throne. The people of this world live in peace and contentment. This has become a great merit. The Empyrean fairy praised, "Don't worry, the world is peaceful, and the safety of the people is the most important. I will not easily reveal my strength in front of others." Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief and said, "That's great." It was not easy to make such an expert willingly accept restrictions. At the very least, Tang Zheng knew that if it was Qin Shi Huang, it would be useless no matter what he said. He couldn't help but rejoice. Fortunately, Qin Shi Huang was dead. Otherwise, the world would really be in chaos. Also, your charm is too great. It's too eye-catching. That's not necessarily a good thing, Tang Zheng said hesitantly. He regretted it as soon as he finished speaking. He wanted to slap his own mouth. Was it wrong for her to be beautiful? This was the dream of many women. Was she supposed to pretend to be ugly on purpose? That was too much to ask of him. Unexpectedly, the Empyrean fairy did not get angry and said, "I know." "What do you think?" Tang Zheng did not understand and raised his head to look. His eyes lit up. This change was not small. It was not that the Empyrean fairy had become ugly. It was still the same face, but the feeling it gave off was completely different. This was very strange. Although her face was still beautiful, it did not give off the soul-stirring and devastatingly beautiful feeling. Or, to put it another way, her beauty was very down-to-earth. It was not the kind of beauty that was high and mighty like a fairy. What was going on? Tang Zheng was confused. It was obviously the same face, so why did it give off such a different feeling? Temperament. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration and thought of this key point. He stared at the Empyrean fairy with burning eyes. As expected, her temperament changed. She became very amiable and approachable. That devastatingly beautiful feeling dropped a level. Can I? Seeing Tang Jing staring at her, the Empyrean fairy asked. Yes. Tang Jing nodded vigorously as if he had just woken up from a dream. This way, there would be no sensational effect. If you need anything or don't understand anything, you can look for me. The Empyrean fairy stared straight at the television and nodded. Obviously, in her eyes, Tang Jing was not as attractive as the television. Tang Jing quickly excused himself and left the room. The next day, the group set off again. This time, they drove the same off-road vehicle. They avoided unnecessary attention and went straight to the capital. Along the way, the Empyrean fairy kept looking out the window, especially the city skyscrapers. Her eyes were full of extraordinary splendor. The changes in the outside world assaulted her vision. She could not take it all in. This world has changed. She sighed silently in her heart. The capital. Tang Jing drove Professor Qi back to his residence. Then, he was troubled. How should he deal with the Empyrean fairy? Could he bring her home? There were already 2 women. Could he bring another one? 3 women made a play. Moreover, these 3 women were not simple characters. If they fought, it would be troublesome. Why aren't we leaving? The Empyrean fairy saw him stop the car by the roadside and asked. Where do you want to go? Didn't you want me to stay by your side? The Empyrean fairy asked. Tang Jing was speechless. If I die, then I'll die. At most, I'll bring Marshall out and find another place to live. This way, I won't have to face Princess and all day. Tang Jing made up his mind and started the car. A moment later, the 2 of them arrived at the door. When he opened the door, he saw a surprising scene. On the sofa sat a person, a man, while Princess Anne and Marshall carefully sat at the side. Princess Anne actually took the initiative to serve tea and water, looking at the other party with eyes full of stars. Damn, how did Tian Chanzi find me here? Tang Jing stared at the man on the sofa. If this was not Tian Chanzi, who else could it be? His long hair was still fluttering in the wind. His face was full of vicissitudes of life, and it was enough to charm many young women. Moreover, his eyes were deep, adding to his flavor. The 3 people in the house also noticed the 2 people at the door. The 3 of them could not help but be attracted by the Empyrean fairy. Although she had already restrained her charm, it was obvious that her charm was still greater than Tang Jing's. As women, Marshall and Princess Anne's reactions were not small. Marshall slightly frowned, while Anne covered her mouth and exclaimed in an exaggerated manner, "Oh my God, so beautiful." Tian Chanzi was even more exaggerated than the 2 of them. He directly jumped up from the sofa and looked at the Empyrean fairy in shock. His face was unprecedentedly serious. Tang Jing, who is she? Tian Chanzi asked in a deep voice. She is. Before Tang Jing could answer, a whirlwind blew beside him. The Empyrean fairy disappeared, and in the blink of an eye, she appeared in front of Tian Chanzi. Her slender jade arm slapped towards Tian Chanzi's chest. When Tian Chanzi saw the Empyrean fairy, he realized that she was not ordinary. However, he did not expect that the other party would not say a word and directly attack him. Moreover, it was a killing move, not showing any mercy. Tian Chanzi was shocked, and immediately used his martial arts to block. Bang! The Empyrean fairy's jade palm slapped Tian Chanzi's arm. Then, Tian Chanzi quickly retreated, breaking the sofa behind him and fiercely crashing into the wall before stopping. Tian Chanzi's eyes flashed with a trace of astonishment. When an expert made a move, one would know the depth of their strength. From this attack, he had already determined how terrifying the Empyrean fairy's cultivation was. Although he was still unable to determine her cultivation, it was enough for him to use 120% of his strength to deal with her. Anne and Marshall were greatly shocked, especially Anne, who jumped up like a butterfly and directly hung on Tang Zheng's shoulder. She shouted, "What are you doing?" Anne's soft body and Tang Zheng's intimate contact made him restless. This kind of treatment would make many men envious. However, the scene in front of him was enough to make Tang Zheng throw away all the distracting thoughts. He loudly stopped them, "Stop fighting." But no one listened to him. The Empyrean fairy acted as if she had seen a life and death enemy. She would not stop until she killed Tian Chanzi, causing Tang Zheng to be confused. In an instant, the luxurious and elegant room was destroyed and turned into a mess. All kinds of high-end household appliances were turned into ruins. Only the two of them could be seen shuttling back and forth. It was too much for the eyes to take in. Anne opened her eyes wide. She did not feel sorry for those high-end goods at all. Instead, she tried her best to catch the two of them. She excitedly waved her fist and shouted, "Master, you can do it. Master, you're the best. Master?" Tang Zheng looked at her suspiciously. Marshall was also shocked by this scene. Just now, she felt that the Empyrean fairy was beautiful, but she did not feel that she was a strong person. But now it seemed that her feelings were wrong. This was because the Empyrean fairy was too powerful, and had already surpassed her perception. Looking at Tang Zheng's suspicious expression, Marshall casually said, "She has already acknowledged Tian Chanzi as her master." "What?" Tang Zheng shouted. This was really one bomb after another thrown at him. The explosion made him dizzy. How could Tian Chanzi accept Anne as his disciple? Moreover, she was a foreign disciple. And finally retracted her gaze and proudly said, "Master saw that I was talented and smart, so he decided to accept me as his disciple and teach me very powerful spells." Damn, spells. Tian Chanzi is just messing with me. Tang Zheng rolled his eyes. He had always been indifferent to Princess Anne. He wanted to force her to leave so that they would not owe each other anything. Now that Tian Chanzi had accepted her as his disciple, how could he force her to leave? Wouldn't Anne be stuck here in the future? Would there still be peaceful days to pass? He was indignant. He really wanted to drag Tian Chanzi over and crack open his head to see what he was thinking. Was he deliberately trying to trick him? Moreover, he already had Fang Shishir as his disciple. What was the point of accepting another disciple? Moreover, they were all female disciples. He must be addicted to accepting disciples. But it was clear that the current situation was not suitable to ask this question. His figure flashed and was about to rush forward to help when he heard a loud bang. A large hole was broken in the wall and a strong wind poured in. This was a 10-story building. Chapter 743. The three of them stared dumbfoundedly at the two figures that were gradually disappearing into the distance. Tang Zheng had no choice but to jump up and also chase after them. The wind whistled past his ears as he landed on the ground, determined the direction and chased after them. Bang! Marshall also landed on the ground and followed closely behind. Only Princess Anne was left standing at the entrance of the big hole, unwillingly stamping her feet and muttering, "Wait until I learn magic, then don't even think about leaving me alone." Passing through the streets and alleys, Tang Zheng avoided the main road and pedestrians and not long after, arrived at the suburbs. In the distance came a loud rumbling sound from a small hill. The battle was very intense. What the hell is this, not saying anything and then fighting, insisting on killing each other? Tang Zheng hatefully said to himself as he rushed straight to the hill. The trees in the hill had already fallen and there were many large holes in the ground, dust and smoke rising everywhere. Whoosh! A person flew out from the dust and smashed into a rock. It was Tian Chanzi, looking quite miserable with blood on the corner of his mouth. The Empyrean fairy rushed out from the hill and mercilessly attacked Tian Chanzi. Tang Zheng was very anxious, hurriedly dodged, stretched out his arms, and blocked the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy's attack came to an abrupt stop. Her eyes looked at Tang Jing kindly and said, "You want to save him?" Tang Jing was aghast. Tian Chanzi was unexpectedly not the Empyrean fairy's opponent. Then how high was her cultivation level? "Why do you want to kill him? Do you have any enmity?" Tang Jing asked haggard. Heaven Monk had already stood up, touched the blood on his mouth, and said hatefully, "What the hell is so smelly, brat? Where did you bring back a crazy woman from? You want nothing more than to tear me into pieces." Hearing the words crazy woman, the Empyrean fairy was about to flip out again, but Tang Jing hurriedly stopped her and impatiently asked, "What is going on? He is a very important person to me. Why do you want to kill him? You're with him?" The Empyrean fairy frowned at him, her eyes flashing with a complicated light. "Who do you think he is?" "Of course I know." Tang Jing said matter-of-factly, "Isn't he Tian Chanzi?" "Tian Chanzi? Who is Tian Chanzi? How could he be Tian Chanzi?" The Empyrean fairy shook her head. Tian Chanzi was unable to restrain his anger, and angrily said, "Why can't I be Tian Chanzi? I will not change my name, I will not change my surname, I am Heaven Monk." "Of course he is Tian Chanzi." Tang Jing also firmly confirmed. The Empyrean fairy stared straight at Tian Chanzi, shook her head and said, "No, he is not some Tian Chanzi, his name is Tian, a demon race celestial venerable. Who knows how many women in the world have been harmed by him?" "What? Demon race celestial venerable Tian?" Tang Jing and Tian Chanzi stared at each other. Tang Jing had never heard of this name, but Tian Chanzi gradually frowned and said, Tian, I have heard of this name. How can I, Tian Chanzi, be a demon race celestial venerable? With your appearance, even if you turned into ashes, would still recognize you." The Empyrean fairy murderously said, "I want to take revenge for the thousands of women who died in your hands." Hearing this, Tang Jing's eyes flashed and he shouted, "Wait a minute, I finally know what is going on, a misunderstanding, all of this is a misunderstanding." Tian Chanzi's eyes gradually lit up as he suddenly realized, "You are saying that my face is Tian's, right? What is the difference? Aren't you him? The difference is big." Tian Chanzi was furious, and bitterly glared at Tang Jing. "Boy, this is all your original idea, look at the trouble now." At that time, Tang Jing mistakenly entered the ancient tomb and saw a floating body, so he instigated Tian Chanzi to use this body to be reborn. Tian Chanzi once saw that the owner of that body was an all-powerful figure, so of course, he was also very satisfied with this body. Tang Jing curled his lips and said, "I have good intentions, but you still blame me. If you didn't use this body, then how could you regain your freedom so quickly? You just don't want me to stay in your head for too long. Do you think I don't know what you are thinking?" Tian Chanzi retorted. "Empyrean fairy, the demon race's heavenly sovereign Tian that you believe is the original owner of this body," Tang Jing said earnestly. Empyrean fairy also heard some clues and asked, "You are saying that he is not Tian himself, but only took over his body?" "Smart, you understand with just a little bit," Tang Jing praised. Tian Chanzi curled his lips and said in his heart, "Smart my ass, you want to kill me without any reason. If it wasn't for my profound power, I would have reported to the Yama Palace." Empyrean fairy stared at Tian Chanzi with burning eyes, as if she wanted to see through him, and muttered, "Tian's cultivation can't be so low. Just now I was wondering, so you are not Tian?" Tian Chanzi blew his beard and glared. What did she mean by, Tian's cultivation can't be so low? This was blatantly looking down on him, but he had to admit that Empyrean fairy was not wrong. His cultivation was indeed not as good as the demon race's heavenly sovereign Tian. Hey, how does she know Tian? Moreover, her cultivation is so strong? Empyrean fairy, why haven't I heard of this name before? Tian Chanzi muttered in his heart. Tang Jing, you brat, where did you find such a powerful person? Tian Chanzi poked Tang Jing and asked indignantly. This time he lost a lot of face and was beaten so badly, in the future he would definitely be laughed at by this brat. It's a long story, I accidentally found her this time. Even if it's a long story, I have plenty of time. Tian Chanzi vowed not to give up until he figured it out. Before Tang Zheng could say anything, Empyrean Fairy shook her head and said, "Your behavior is indeed not sure, Tian." Tian Chanzi was angry and said, "Sure, Tian is the demon race's heavenly sovereign, the public enemy of the righteous path. So many young girls died in his hands, how can I be him?" Tang Zheng curiously asked, "Who is this Sure Tian?" Tian Chanzi coldly snorted and turned his head to ignore him. Empyrean Fairy said, "Sure Tian is the demon race's heavenly sovereign, his cultivation is very strong, but he has a hobby, which is to collect all the beautiful girls in the world. Therefore, not only are the girls of the ordinary families deeply harmed, even the female disciples of the official families and famous sects are unable to escape his evil claws." "Damn! Isn't he a flower thief?" Tang Zheng exclaimed. "Exactly. This kind of person, everyone has the right to kill. When you see him, there is no need to talk nonsense with him, just kill him," Empyrean Fairy said as she glared at Tian Chanzi. Although Tian Chanzi was not sure Tian, he also felt a chill run down his spine. Tang Zheng suddenly understood, no wonder she wanted to kill Tian Chanzi without saying a word, she simply did not want to talk nonsense with him. It seems like her resentment towards Sure Tian was quite deep. "Hey, Tian Chanzi, you don't say, I used to think that you were not a decent person, I actually guessed correctly," Tang Zheng deliberately joked. "Scram!" Tian Chanzi unhappily said, he was very angry at this kind of person who hit a person when he was down. Tang Zheng did not mind and laughed loudly, since the misunderstanding was resolved, there was no need to fight and kill. At this time, Marshall also caught up and said, "There are people from the government coming." Tang Zheng guessed that this must be because the commotion was too big, so he shouted, "The situation is tense, let's go, it won't be too late to leave here first." He did not want the Empyrean Fairy's identity to be exposed. The four of them quickly left the hill and entered the city, finding a secluded place to stop. "Brat, tell us the truth, what is going on?" Tian Chanzi impatiently asked. Marshall also looked at him expectantly, obviously. She was also very curious about the Empyrean Fairy's identity. Tang Zheng glanced at Empyrean Fairy, seeing that she did not have any intention to object. He announced the matter of Qin Shi Huang's tomb. The two of them were dumbfounded, unable to calm down for a long time. After a long time, Tian Chanzi sighed with emotion. "Qin Shi Huang's name is like thunder to the ears. I did not expect there to be so many twists and turns. Hey, you did not call me along for this kind of exploration. You come and go like a ghost, how could I find you? Moreover, I did not know that it was Qin Shi Huang's tomb." "Humph, in the future, if there is such a thing, remember to call me, or else you will be in trouble." Tian Chanzi warned. Tang Zheng nodded in agreement. If there was such a thing next time, he would definitely call him. This time it was too dangerous. If it was not for the pure yang energy detonating Qin Shi Huang, then Tang Zheng's life would really be over. Marshall's eyes were filled with deep concern, hearing that he had walked through the gates of hell. She could not help but feel deep self-blame. She promised her master and master's wife to take care of him, protect him, but her strength was too weak, she was simply unable to do so. She secretly made up her mind, in the future, she must work harder to cultivate, she must keep up with Tang Zheng's footsteps, she must not be his burden, drag him down. "Empyrean Fairy, although he is from the pre-Qin era, do you know where she came from and what sect she came from?" Tian Chanzi deliberately lowered his voice and asked. Tang Zheng glanced at Empyrean Fairy and regretfully shook his head. Empyrean Fairy lightly said, "I do not belong to any sect, I am alone." "How can you be so powerful without a sect?" Tian Chanzi questioned. "Why not?" Empyrean Fairy asked back. Tian Chanzi was speechless. He pulled Tang Zheng again and said in an inaudible voice, "Do you remember what I told you before? You have the 9 yang saint body, you must periodically absorb pure yin energy, only by balancing yin and yang can you preserve your life. You have also seen Qin Shi Huang's end, you definitely do not want to become like him. But among the women in the world, the ones with the most pure yin energy are those with the profound yin body. This kind of woman can only be encountered by chance. You brat, your luck is truly heaven-defying, you even met one like this. If you were to absorb her pure yin energy, then your pure yang energy will be neutralized by a lot. You brat's life will also be preserved. Before he finished speaking, Tian Chanzi discovered that there was one more person in front of him. A murderous gaze swept over. Empyrean Fairy stared at him with a murderous look and said, "Do you really want to die?" Tian Chanzi immediately swallowed back his words. He resentfully said, "No. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."